Hey there, welcome to Broderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. The dark side of popularity. Have you ever wondered how fleeting fame can be? One moment, you're an ordinary person living a mundane life, and the next, you're thrust into the spotlight, your face plastered across screens and your name echoing in conversations. I was that ordinary person, navigating the chaos of daily life, until social media changed everything. My ascent to popularity felt intoxicating at first, a whirlwind of likes, comments, and followers that filled the void I never realized was there. It all began when I posted a video on a platform that showcased my quirky sense of humor. I never expected it to resonate with so many, but suddenly, I found myself gaining thousands of followers overnight. The thrill was euphoric. I received countless messages from fans, all eager to connect, share their admiration, and revel in my newfound success. I was flattered and, admittedly, addicted to the validation. But as I navigated this new reality, a gnawing discomfort began to creep in. It started subtly, with a few strange comments here and there. At first, I brushed them off, convinced that not everyone could handle the lightheartedness of my content. However, I soon realized these messages were more than just harmless banter. They were laced with an underlying tone that sent shivers down my spine. "Can't wait to meet you in person," one particularly unsettling comment read. "I know where you live." I laughed it off, telling myself it was just a poorly worded joke. After all, my growing popularity meant I had to develop a thick skin, right? But deep down, a flicker of unease sparked within me. As my follower count surged, so did the bizarre interactions. Strangers began to invade my personal space, figuratively at first, with their unsolicited opinions and increasingly intrusive comments. I tried to focus on the supportive messages, clinging to the positive energy, but the negativity loomed like a dark cloud, threatening to overshadow my joy. One evening, as I scrolled through my notifications, a chilling message caught my eye. "You think you're so special, don't you? I'm watching you." My heart raced, and the lighthearted atmosphere I'd cultivated suddenly felt suffocating. My pulse quickened, and I could feel the walls closing in. Should I take this seriously? I pondered, shaking my head as if I could rid myself of the thoughts that plagued me. Maybe it was just someone trying to get attention. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked beneath the surface, and a cold sweat formed on my brow. Thus began my spiral into the darker side of popularity. With each notification that buzzed my phone, my excitement was now mingled with an anxiety I could not shake off. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare I could never have anticipated. The next day, I woke up with a heavy heart, the weight of that chilling message lingering in my mind. I had always prided myself on my resilience, but this was different. The digital world I had once viewed as a playground now felt like a vast, dark ocean filled with unseen threats. I tried to distract myself by focusing on my content, brainstorming new ideas to engage my followers. I spent hours creating a lighthearted skit, hoping to push away the shadows creeping into my thoughts. As I filmed, my laughter rang out, echoing off the walls of my living room. For a fleeting moment, I felt a sense of normalcy wash over me, but as I edited the video later, the comment replayed in my mind, "I'm watching you." That night, As I sat on my couch scrolling through the comments on my latest post, a flood of warmth enveloped me. Most comments were positive, praising my humor and creativity. But mixed in were those darker notes, sarcastic remarks, veiled threats, and eerie invitations to meet in person. My heart sank further with every notification that popped up. I know where you live. Can't wait to see you out and about. Just wait. I felt my stomach drop. I tried to convince myself it was just a price of fame, a few outliers in a sea of fans. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The shadows of doubt crept closer, darkening the corners of my mind. Each day that passed, my anxiety intensified. I started to notice strange cars parked outside my apartment. They weren't the usual ones I recognized. I'd glance out my window, trying to convince myself it was paranoia, but the knot in my stomach tightened. One evening, I spotted a figure standing at the corner of my street. They seemed to be looking directly at my window. My heart raced, and I quickly drew the curtains, shutting myself away from the world. I told myself to stay strong. I had a support system, friends and family who cared about me. I shared my concerns with my best friend, Emma, during our usual weekend coffee date. As I recounted my experience, her brow furrowed in concern. Maybe you should report those comments, she suggested, her voice laced with worry. It's not normal. This isn't just part of being popular. It sounds like stalking. I waved her off, laughing nervously. It's probably just someone messing around. I mean, who would really do something? But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The following week brought an unexpected surge in my follower count. With every new notification, my excitement was now tainted with dread. As I prepared for another video shoot, I glanced at the latest messages. One particularly stood out. Your popularity won't save you from me. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I sat frozen, my phone slipping from my fingers and clattering onto the hardwood floor. What had I gotten myself into? I spent the rest of the day in a haze, unable to focus on anything but the gnawing feeling of being hunted. I stopped posting for a few days, hoping that by retreating into the shadows, I could escape whatever was pursuing me. But my absence was met with concern from my fans, a wave of messages pouring in, urging me to return. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing a dangerous game. The allure of fame that once sparked joy in my heart now loomed like a dark cloud, ready to swallow me whole. I found myself staring at my reflection in the mirror, the person staring back at me feeling like a stranger. Get it together, I whispered to myself. You're stronger than this. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows danced around my apartment, reminding me that the darkness was closing in. As night fell, the world outside my window transformed. The bustling sounds of the city, which had once been a comforting backdrop, now felt like an eerie reminder of my isolation. I tried to distract myself with the glow of my phone screen, scrolling through messages, but the brightness seemed to amplify my anxiety. The glow cast unsettling shadows on the walls, flickering like the nerves in my stomach. After a long silence, I picked up the phone and started typing a message to my followers, letting them know I needed a little break. It felt necessary, almost like a protective barrier. But just as I hit send, a notification chimed. A new message appeared, catching my breath in my throat. Are you scared yet? You should be. My hands trembled as I read it over and over, the words morphing into a physical presence in the room. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone against the wall, to unleash the panic that clawed at my insides. Instead, I set it down and wrapped my arms around my knees, rocking back and forth on the couch. Maybe I should just leave everything behind, I whispered to myself, but the thought was quickly dismissed. Social media had become my life, my escape. I had built something out of nothing, and I couldn't let fear dictate my choices. I turned to my laptop and opened a blank document, determined to pour my feelings onto the page. Writing had always been a therapeutic outlet for me, a way to process emotions and clear my head. As I typed, I let the words flow, my fears, my doubts, and my dreams for the future. The rhythm of my fingers against the keys soothed me, pulling me away from the overwhelming sensations that clouded my mind. Hours passed, and as I typed my last sentence, I felt a flicker of relief wash over me. I was reminded that vulnerability could also be a source of strength. Maybe sharing my experiences, my journey, could inspire others who might be feeling similarly alone. I decided to post a candid video the next day, one that shared my fears but framed them in a way that felt empowering. This is who I am, I told myself. I won't let them take that from me. The following morning, I woke up feeling a bit lighter, though still wary. I recorded my video, speaking from the heart, detailing my experiences with online fame, both good and bad. I ended it with a call for kindness and understanding, urging my followers to think before they commented. As I uploaded the video, a sense of hope washed over me. Perhaps my vulnerability would resonate, drawing a line in the sand against negativity. But as the video went live and the notifications began to pour in, my heart sank. The comments varied from supportive to downright hostile, and I felt the familiar twist of anxiety return. Just get over it. It's part of the job, read one comment. Attention seeker. No one cares about your drama, another echoed. But there was something darker lurking beneath the surface. A comment caught my eye that sent ice coursing through my veins. Your fear is intoxicating. I can feel it from here. My chest tightened. I had shared my vulnerability, yet it only seemed to attract more predators. I looked around my apartment, suddenly feeling the walls closing in around me. The mirrors reflecting my startled expression made me feel like I was being scrutinized from all angles, as if 1,000 eyes were watching me, dissecting my every move. That night, I locked the doors and turned off the lights, plunging myself into darkness. The city outside felt distant, the muffled sounds of life becoming haunting whispers. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to every creak of the building. Sleep eluded me, my mind racing with possibilities. What if someone truly was watching? What if my words had drawn the wrong attention? My heart raced as the shadows loomed larger in my imagination, creeping into the corners of my mind. I remembered my friend Emma's warning and began to wonder if I should take precautions. I contemplated purchasing security cameras or even moving to a different neighborhood altogether. But the thought of uprooting my life felt like a defeat, like surrendering to the fear that had invaded my mind. I had always believed in confronting my demons, but this felt different. As dawn broke, casting pale light into my room, I resolved to take action. I would consult with Emma about reporting the threats and, if necessary, involving the police. I couldn't let fear consume me. I had to fight back. The allure of fame had turned into a nightmare, but I would not go down without a bow. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and unease. I found myself constantly checking the locks on my doors and glancing out the window, half expecting to see someone watching me from the street below. My social media presence, once a source of joy and fulfillment, now felt like a double-edged sword. Each notification sent a jolt of panic through me, and I started to dread my phone buzzing with new messages. Despite my rising anxiety, I still posted content, feeling the pressure to maintain my online persona. I crafted videos filled with laughter and lightheartedness, but the smiles felt forced, my mind constantly drifting back to those unsettling messages. I could no longer enjoy the creative process, as the fear of being watched gnawed at my insides, leaving me hollow. One afternoon, I decided to visit a nearby cafe, hoping that a change of scenery would lift my spirits. As I settled into a corner booth with a steaming cup of coffee, I attempted to lose myself in the mundane sounds of clinking cups and muted conversations. For a moment, it felt blissful until I noticed a figure in the corner, their eyes fixed on me. The stranger was a man, his face obscured by a baseball cap, but there was an intensity in his gaze that sent my heart racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being scrutinized, as if he knew all my secrets, all my fears. I quickly glanced down at my phone, pretending to scroll through social media, but my hands trembled too much to focus. "Just breathe," I whispered to myself, trying to regain control. I felt foolish for letting my imagination spiral, yet I couldn't help but feel like the walls were closing in. After a few agonizing minutes, I paid for my coffee and rushed out, casting one last wary glance over my shoulder. The man remained in his seat, still watching. Once back in the safety of my apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it, taking a deep breath to steady my racing heart. I pulled out my phone and texted Emma, my fingers shaking as I typed. "I think I'm being followed. Can we talk?" Her reply was swift, filled with concern. "Of course. Let's meet up tonight. I'll bring some snacks and we can brainstorm a plan." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I felt a flicker of hope. Emma had always been my rock, the one person who could pull me back from the brink of despair. When she arrived, I felt an overwhelming wave of relief wash over me. "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. "Tell me everything." I recounted my experiences, from the threatening messages to the man at the cafe. As I spoke, I watched the worry etched on her face deepen. "This isn't just an online thing anymore," she said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "We need to take this seriously. I'll help you report the messages, and we can look into getting a security system for your apartment." The thought of involving the police made me feel vulnerable, like I was admitting defeat. But as Emma urged me to take control of my situation, I realized she was right. I needed to protect myself, to reclaim my life from the grip of fear that had taken hold of me. We spent the night researching options, looking at security systems and discussing what steps to take next. I felt empowered, like I was taking back the narrative that had spiraled out of control. Emma even suggested I temporarily limit my social media presence, allowing me to breathe without the constant influx of attention. The following morning, I made the decision to report the threats. I contacted my local police department and described my situation in detail, relaying the menacing messages I had received. The officer I spoke with was sympathetic, but I could tell he didn't quite grasp the severity of my fear. Online harassment can be serious, but unless you feel physically threatened, it's often difficult to take action, he explained. "We can document your reports, but I recommend increasing your security measures." Frustration bubbled within me, but I knew I had to remain calm. "I understand, but I need you to know that I genuinely feel in danger. I've noticed someone watching me." He nodded, jotting down my concerns, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. It was disheartening, but I tried to remind myself that I was doing the right thing. That evening, as I prepared to return to social media, I took a deep breath and paused, staring at the screen. I felt a mix of fear and determination swirling within me. I decided to record a live video addressing my followers directly. I would let them know I was taking a step back to prioritize my safety and mental health. As I went live, I was met with a flood of comments, the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through me. I spoke candidly about my experiences, my fears, and my decision to step back. I'm grateful for your support, but right now, I need to focus on my well-being, I concluded, trying to maintain a calm demeanor. The response was mixed. Many expressed understanding and support, while others questioned my motives, accusing me of seeking attention. The hurtful comments stung, but I reminded myself that this was about my safety. As the days turned into weeks, I began to establish a routine that revolved around self-care. I took walks in the daylight, avoiding secluded areas and always keeping my head on a swivel. I began practicing mindfulness techniques, focusing on my breathing to help manage my anxiety. Emma was a constant source of support, checking in on me regularly and encouraging me to maintain my boundaries. Yet, the darkness lingered just beneath the surface. My fears never fully dissipated. They had become a part of me, entwined in my thoughts and experiences. And just when I began to feel a sense of normalcy creeping back, the notification that would change everything flashed on my phone. Your absence is so telling. You should know I'm always watching. The words clawed at my chest, the fear I had tried to subdue crashing over me like a tidal wave. The shock of that message left me reeling. My fingers trembled as I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar rush of panic surged through me, a tidal wave of dread crashing over my fragile sense of security. I could feel my breath quickening, each inhalation a desperate attempt to stave off the anxiety that threatened to engulf me. I had hoped that by stepping back, by regaining control, I could outsmart the looming threat. But this message, this chilling reminder that someone was still watching, shattered that illusion. It was a reminder that the shadows were not only present but were closing in. "Emma!" I shouted, my voice shaky. I needed her presence to anchor me. She rushed into the room, concern etched across her features. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes scanning my face for clues. I thrust my phone toward her, my voice barely a whisper. "Read this." Her expression shifted as she read the words on the screen. "Oh my God. This isn't just some random troll anymore. This is serious." I nodded, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I thought I was making progress. I thought I was safe. Emma placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, her grip firm. "We need to take action. We can't let this go unchecked. I'll help you report it again, and we can look into more serious security options." We spent the rest of the evening strategizing. Emma suggested I document every message I received, cataloging each threat meticulously. I opened a new file on my laptop, the blank page feeling like a weight on my shoulders. Each keystroke felt like a step into a darker world, but I forced myself to type it out. I recorded the date, the message, and my reactions, pouring my fears into that digital document. As I wrote, memories flooded back, the thrill of my rise to fame, the joy of sharing my life with thousands of people, and the gradual shift as my online presence turned into something menacing. I recalled how I had felt invincible, each new follower a testament to my creativity and charm. But now, that charm felt like a distant memory, a fading echo overshadowed by the specter of fear. Once I finished documenting everything, I sent the file to Emma. "At least we'll have a record," I said, trying to sound hopeful, but the tightness in my chest wouldn't budge. That night, I struggled to sleep, tossing and turning as the shadows danced on my walls. I tried to drown out my fears with calming music, but every creak of the building seemed amplified, echoing through the silence. I kept my phone close, anxiously checking it every few minutes, waiting for a notification that felt like a noose tightening around my neck. The next day, I decided to take a proactive approach. I called a local security company to discuss installing a camera system in my apartment. I knew it was a necessary step, one that would give me some semblance of control. As I talked with the representative, I felt a flicker of determination ignite within me. "I want to make sure I have footage of anyone approaching my home," I said, my voice steady. "I want to feel safe again." They promised to send someone over for a consultation that week, and I ended up feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. It was a step, but I still felt exposed, as if I were standing in front of a crowd with all my secrets laid bare. Later that afternoon, I ventured out for a walk in the park, hoping the fresh air would help clear my mind. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling like whispers of comfort. For a moment, I felt at peace, basking in the warmth of the sun. But that feeling was short-lived. As I strolled along the path, I caught sight of a figure across the way, standing still under a tree. My heart raced as I recognized him, the man from the cafe. The baseball cap shaded his face, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching me as if I were the only person in the world. Panic surged through my veins, and I quickened my pace, glancing back to confirm that he was indeed following me. My instincts kicked in, urging me to escape. I ducked into a nearby coffee shop, the bell above the door jingling as I rushed inside. I pressed my back against the wall, scanning the room for an exit. My breath came in quick bursts, and I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I pulled out my phone and texted Emma frantically, "He's here." The man from the cafe. What do I do? Within moments, my phone buzzed with her reply. "Stay calm. Look for a way out. I'm on my way." I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I couldn't let fear take hold. I had to be strategic. I surveyed the shop, spotting an exit in the back. I took a step toward the rear, moving slowly, praying that he wouldn't notice me. Just as I reached the door, the bell jingled again, and I turned to see him walk in, his gaze sweeping the room. My heart dropped. I bolted through the door and into the alley behind the cafe, the cool air hitting me like a slap. I ran, my feet pounding against the pavement, adrenaline coursing through me. I needed to get to a safe place, anywhere away from him. I darted down side streets, my mind racing. I heard footsteps behind me and knew I had to move faster. My legs burned, but I pushed on, heart pounding in my chest. The city blurred around me as I ran, my only thought to escape the man who seemed hell-bent on haunting me. Finally, I spotted a group of people ahead, a small crowd outside a restaurant. I surged toward them, feeling a rush of safety wash over me as I slipped into their midst. I turned back, scanning the street for him, but he was nowhere in sight. Panting and trembling, I leaned against a lamppost, trying to regain my composure. Emma arrived moments later, her eyes wide with concern. "I got your message." "What happened?" I struggled to catch my breath as I relayed the events, my voice shaky. "He followed me. I don't know how he found me." Emma's expression turned serious. "We need to call the police. This is escalating, and we can't ignore it any longer." As much as I hated the idea, I knew she was right. I couldn't let fear dictate my life anymore. This was more than an online issue, it was a tangible threat. With shaking hands, I dialed the police, my heart racing as I recounted the encounter. I need to file a report. I believe I'm being stalked. The officer on the line took my information and assured me they would send someone over. As I hung up, a sense of dread washed over me. What had I gotten myself into? Are you okay? Emma asked, her voice softening. I nodded, but inside, I felt like a wreck. I never imagined it would come to this. We stood in silence, the reality of the situation sinking in. I was no longer just a social media star, I was a target, and my life had become a precarious tightrope walk between fame and fear. As we waited for the police, I found myself spiraling into a whirlwind of thoughts. I felt exposed, stripped bare by the very attention that had once lifted me up. My mind raced back to the earlier days of my online presence, when each post felt like a celebration, a chance to connect with people who appreciated my creativity. Now, that connection felt like a double-edged sword. Emma, noticing my faraway gaze, squeezed my hand gently. Hey, let's focus on the now. We'll get through this together, she reassured me, her voice steady. Thank you, I murmured, trying to ground myself in the moment. Minutes later, a police car pulled up, its lights flashing, cutting through the evening gloom. The officer who stepped out was a woman with a kind demeanor, her name tag reading Officer Ramirez. She approached us, her expression serious but approachable. Hi, I'm Officer Ramirez. I received a call about a possible stalking incident. I took a deep breath, my heart racing again as I recounted the day's events. Emma chimed in, supporting my account, reinforcing my fear and the urgency of the situation. After we finished, Officer Ramirez nodded, taking notes. Thank you for being so thorough. I know this is difficult, but it's important we document everything. Can you describe the man who followed you? I hesitated, my mind racing. He was tall, wearing a baseball cap, and I didn't see his face clearly. I felt frustrated at my inability to provide more details. I think he had dark hair, but that's all I can recall. That's okay, she replied gently. We can work with that. If you see him again or receive any more messages, it's crucial you contact us immediately. We'll also increase patrols in your area. As Officer Ramirez continued taking notes, I felt the weight of my fear begin to shift. Maybe this was a step toward reclaiming my life. I was no longer alone in this fight. I had an ally in the police force, someone who could help protect me. Once the officer finished, she asked if we had any questions. What should I do if he approaches me again? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Trust your instincts. If you feel threatened, don't hesitate to call us. And avoid confrontation. Your safety is the priority. After Officer Ramirez left, Emma and I stood outside the restaurant, the cool night air refreshing against my flushed skin. Let's get something to eat, Emma suggested, her tone lightening the heavy atmosphere. You need to take care of yourself, and I think we both could use a distraction. I nodded, grateful for her presence. We found a cozy diner nearby, the neon lights casting a warm glow against the darkening sky. As we slid into a booth, I felt a sense of normalcy return, even if it was fleeting. Tell me about your week, Emma prompted, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, trying to draw me into a conversation away from the darkness looming in my mind. I took a sip of my coffee and began to recount my daily routines, the mundane activities that had once brought me joy. It felt good to share those moments, a reminder of life before the shadows. But as I spoke, the weight of my fears still lingered just below the surface, ready to bubble over at any moment. The diner was filled with the hum of conversation and the clattering of dishes, providing a comforting backdrop. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to indulge in the normalcy of it all, laughing at endless stories and reminiscing about happier times. But then, my phone buzzed again, cutting through the warmth of the moment like a knife. My heart raced as I glanced at the screen, praying it was a message from someone supportive, perhaps a friend checking in. Instead, my blood ran cold. Still waiting for you to notice me. You should be more careful. The message sent a jolt of fear through me, the words echoing in my mind. It was a chilling reminder that no matter how far I ran, the threat was always just a heartbeat away. Is everything okay? Emma asked, her brow furrowed in concern as she noticed my change in demeanor. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. It's him. He messaged me again. Emma leaned in, her voice low. What does it say? I showed her the screen, feeling a lump form in my throat. What do I do? I thought involving the police would help, but it just keeps escalating. She placed her hand over mine, her grip firm and reassuring. We're going to figure this out. You're not alone in this. Despite her words, the despair began to creep back in. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, each message tightening the noose of fear around my neck. I couldn't let it consume me, but it was difficult to hold on to hope when darkness loomed so large. After finishing our meal, Emma suggested we head back to my apartment, knowing I wouldn't feel safe alone. I agreed, though the thought of returning felt suffocating. The fear had become my constant companion, and I was tired of living in its shadow. Once home, I turned on all the lights, the brightness offering a small comfort against the encroaching darkness. Emma helped me set up my laptop to display the security camera feed once it was installed, our discussions punctuated by moments of silence as I stared at the wall, lost in thought. Hey, let's watch something, she suggested, breaking the tension. We settled on a light-hearted show, and I tried to lose myself in the storyline. I laughed at the antics of the characters, but in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the nagging sense that I was still in danger. As the episode ended, Emma glanced at me, her expression serious. You're not just going to sit and wait for him to make a move, are you? You need to be proactive. We should come up with a plan for what to do if he shows up again. The weight of her words hung in the air. You're right, I said, determination igniting within me. I can't let him dictate my life anymore. I need to take control. We brainstormed strategies, ways to escape if necessary, where to seek help, and how to protect myself. Emma suggested carrying pepper spray, and though the thought of having to use it terrified me, I agreed. It felt like a step toward empowerment, a symbol of taking back my agency. As the night wore on, I felt a strange mixture of fear and resolve. The messages might continue, and the threat might loom larger than ever, but I was no longer going to let it define me. I was a survivor, and I would fight to reclaim my life. But deep down, a nagging fear whispered that this was just the beginning. The shadows were growing darker, and I knew I had to prepare for whatever might come next. The next few days dragged on like a slow-motion nightmare. I felt like I was living in a constant state of heightened alert, as if I were a character in a horror film, waiting for the music to swell before the inevitable jump scare. I spent hours scrolling through my social media, trying to decipher the intentions of the countless followers who had once been my fans. Was there anyone among them who might want to harm me? I couldn't help but feel paranoid, every notification on my phone turning into a potential threat. I tried to remind myself that most of my followers were harmless, but the fear had seeped into my very being, transforming my once vibrant online presence into a source of dread. Emma stayed close, her unwavering support a lifeline in my turbulent sea of emotions. She helped me monitor my accounts, encouraging me to block anyone who seemed suspicious or overly aggressive. With every notification, we found ourselves on high alert, our hearts racing in tandem. "Look at this comment," Emma said one afternoon, pointing at my screen. "It's creepy. He's definitely crossing a line." I peered at the message. "You're so beautiful, but I bet you're hiding something dark. Let me help you discover it." I felt a chill run down my spine, a primal instinct urging me to take action. "Block him," I said, my voice shaking. "I can't take any more of this." After blocking the user, I felt a momentary sense of relief, but it quickly faded. For every account I blocked, it felt like two more sprang up in its place, each one more unsettling than the last. It was as if my fears were multiplying, feeding off my anxiety and turning my online world into a battleground. That night, as I prepared for bed, I heard a noise outside my window. My heart leaped into my throat, and I rushed to the curtain, peeking through the fabric. I saw only shadows dancing in the streetlight. It was a false alarm, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins felt real enough. "Emma," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Did you hear that?" She appeared in my doorway, her expression concerned. "What's wrong?" "I thought I saw someone outside," I said, my breath coming in quick gasps. She crossed the room, peering out into the night. "There's no one here. It's just your mind playing tricks on you." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. Each rustle of the leaves outside made me flinch, every creak of the building amplified by my overactive imagination. Sleep was elusive that night, a fleeting dream that I desperately chased but could never catch. I tossed and turned, battling nightmares where faceless figures loomed over me, whispering threats and taunting me with my own vulnerability. In the morning, exhaustion clung to my bones like a heavy cloak. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the rich aroma offering a moment of comfort, but even that couldn't shake the persistent weight in my chest. I knew I needed to get outside to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. Emma suggested we visit a local farmer's market that weekend. "It'll be fun, and you need some fresh air," she insisted. I hesitated, the thought of being in a crowded place sending a shiver down my spine, but I eventually agreed. As we walked through the market, the vibrant colors of the produce and the laughter of families around us initially made me feel lighter. But then, the nagging sensation crept back in, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. I scanned the crowd, searching for anyone who might fit the profile of the man who had been stalking me. "Look at those flowers," Emma exclaimed, pointing toward a stall overflowing with bright blooms. I forced myself to smile, trying to engage in the moment, but the momentary distraction was short-lived. As I reached for a bouquet, I caught a glimpse of someone watching me. A man stood a few stalls down, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He was wearing a baseball cap. My heart dropped as I met his eyes, a sickening realization washing over me. "Emma," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "He's here." She turned, following my gaze. "Where?" "The man from the cafe," I stammered, my hands shaking. "Are you sure?" I don't know, but it looks like him." Emma grabbed my arm, her grip firm. "Let's get out of here. We need to leave now." We navigated through the crowd, my heart pounding as I fought the urge to look back. I felt a mixture of fear and desperation surge within me, urging me to escape. With every step, the man seemed to loom larger in my mind, a specter chasing me through the bustling market. Once we reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, my hands clammy as I tried to steady my breathing. "Just get in," Emma urged, her voice calm yet filled with urgency. I climbed into the passenger seat, and Emma rushed around to the driver's side, her movements swift. As she started the engine, I glanced back at the market, half expecting to see him watching us leave. But the crowd had shifted, and I couldn't spot him among the throngs of people. We drove in silence, the weight of the experience settling heavily between us. I felt like I was unraveling, my sanity fraying at the edges. "I can't do this," I finally admitted, my voice trembling. "Every time I think I'm safe, something else happens. I feel like I'm losing my mind." Emma turned to me, her expression softening. "You're not losing your mind. This is real, and it's okay to feel scared. But you're strong, and we will get through this together." Her words offered a sliver of comfort, a fragile lifeline in the storm. But deep down, I knew I was spiraling, my mind a battleground where fear and paranoia clashed relentlessly. Once we arrived home, I locked the door behind us, a ritual that had become ingrained in my routine. I felt a sense of temporary safety, but it was fleeting. The world outside was still filled with shadows, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were closing in. The next few days passed in a blur of anxiety and self-doubt. I avoided social media, withdrawing from the world that had once felt like a source of connection. Emma tried to encourage me to engage again, but the thought of sharing my life felt too risky. I began to obsessively check the locks on my doors and windows, making sure every entrance was secure. Each time I heard a noise outside, my heart raced with panic, and I found myself retreating further into the safety of my home. One evening, as I sat curled up on my couch, the glow of the television flickering in front of me, I heard a sound that froze my blood. It was a faint knock at the door, soft, almost tentative. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tensed. Who could it be? My heart raced as I glanced toward the door, the world outside my apartment suddenly feeling hostile. I grabbed my phone, ready to call Emma if I needed to. Another knock came, this time louder. "Is someone there?" I called out, my voice shaky as I tried to sound braver than I felt. Silence fell, heavy and oppressive. I felt the urge to look through the peephole, but fear paralyzed me. I couldn't let myself give in to panic. What if it was him? What if I opened the door and found a nightmare waiting for me? I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I had to know. Cautiously, I approached the door, peering through the peephole. The sight sent my heart plummeting. It was him, the man from the cafe, his baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. My breath hitched to my throat, and my heart raced as I stepped back from the door. I felt like I was in a surreal nightmare where the walls were closing in around me. The man was here, standing right outside my apartment, and every instinct in my body screamed for me to hide. "Emma!" I called out, panic lacing my voice. I stumbled back, pressing myself against the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. Emma, who had been in the kitchen preparing a snack, rushed in, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's wrong?" "It's him. The man from the cafe. He's at the door." My voice cracked with fear, and I could see the realization dawning on Emma's face as she quickly moved to my side. "Okay, stay calm," she said, her voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "Let me handle this." She stepped toward the door, and I instinctively grabbed her arm. No, don't open it. What if he's dangerous? Just trust me, she replied, her eyes firm and reassuring. I'll call the police first. I watched as she moved back to grab her phone, my heart racing with a mix of fear and desperation. The knocking persisted, now growing more insistent, each thud reverberating through the door like a drumbeat of dread. Let me in. I just want to talk. The voice on the other side was deep and unnervingly calm, sending chills down my spine. I swallowed hard, trying to gather my thoughts. What do we do? I whispered, my voice barely audible. We stay quiet and don't open the door, Emma said, her focus unwavering as she dialed. The police are on their way. The minutes stretched into eternity, each knock a reminder that I was trapped in my own home. My pulse raced as the man continued to speak, his voice a haunting blend of charm and menace. Come on, I know you're in there. We just need to talk. I promise I won't hurt you. My skin crawled at his words, and I shook my head, unable to articulate my fear. It felt like he was trying to weave a false sense of security around me, luring me into a trap. Emma's voice broke through my thoughts as she spoke with the dispatcher. Yes, we need help. There's a man outside my friend's apartment, and we believe he's stalking her. Please hurry. Tell them to hurry. I urged, my voice trembling. He could try to break in. Emma nodded, her eyes locked on mine. I'm telling them. Just hold on a little longer. As we waited, I tried to focus on my breathing, grounding myself in the present. But the anxiety clawed at my insides, making it hard to think straight. Each moment felt like a countdown, the tension thickening the air around us. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. A heavy silence enveloped the apartment, and my heart sank. Had he given up? Or was he plotting his next move? Emma, I don't like this, I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Just then, my phone buzzed again, its screen lighting up with a new message. I glanced at it, my stomach dropping. You're hiding from me, but I'll always find you. I promise you that. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. He knows I'm scared, I muttered, my voice quaking. He's playing with me. Emma moved closer, her presence a comforting anchor in my spiraling thoughts. He's trying to intimidate you. Don't let him win. We have to stay strong. Just then, I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder as they approached. My heart surged with a mixture of relief and anxiety. Would the police arrive in time? Would they be able to keep me safe from this man who had invaded my life? The sirens faded as they came to a halt outside my apartment building, and a moment later, I heard the thud of footsteps in the hallway. That's them, Emma said, her eyes bright with hope. We moved to the door, pressing our ears against the wood. I could hear muffled voices, the police questioning the man who had been lurking outside. My stomach twisted with dread, and I could hardly breathe as I listened intently. Ma'am, we need you to open the door, a voice called from outside. We're here to help. Emma exchanged a glance with me, and I nodded, slowly moving to unlock the door. With a shaky breath, I turned the handle and pulled it open just enough to see the two officers standing there, their uniforms offering a sense of security I desperately needed. Are you all right? One of the officers asked, concern etched across his features. I nodded, though I felt anything but okay. He was just here, I managed to say, pointing toward the door. The man from the cafe. He's been stalking me. Can you describe him? The second officer asked, stepping closer to listen as I recounted the details of the encounter. Before I could finish, a shout rang out from the hallway. "She's lying. I'm not a threat." It was the man, his voice oozing with faux innocence. The officers exchanged glances, and I felt a rush of panic. "He's dangerous," I insisted. "He followed me. He sent me messages. You have to believe me." The first officer held up a hand, attempting to calm the situation. "Stay here, ma'am. We'll handle this." I stepped back into the apartment, my heart pounding as I watched the officers approach the man. I caught a glimpse of him through the crack in the door. He was wearing a baseball cap, just like I remembered, his expression a mask of frustration and anger. "Listen, you need to leave this young woman alone. We've received reports about you," one of the officers said, his tone authoritative. "I'm not doing anything. I just wanted to talk to her." "I care about her," the man protested, his voice rising with indignation. Emma grabbed my arm, her grip tight as we both leaned closer to listen. "This isn't good," she whispered. "What if he tries to run? Or worse, what if he tries to hurt them?" I replied, the dread coiling tighter in my stomach. Suddenly, I heard a scuffle, a loud thud echoing through the hallway. "Get away from me," the man yelled, and I instinctively flinched, stepping back from the door. "Step back," one of the officers shouted, and my breath caught as I imagined the worst-case scenario playing out right outside my door. Then, as suddenly as it began, silence fell. Emma and I exchanged a worried glance, both of us frozen in place, waiting for the outcome. Moments later, the door swung open, and the officers stepped inside, their expressions grim. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some more questions," the first officer said, his demeanor serious. "Is he gone?" I asked, my voice shaking. "For now," he replied. "We're going to need to file a report and gather more information. But we want you to stay alert. He may try to reach out again." I nodded, a sense of dread washing over me. I knew he would come back. This was far from over. As I sat down on the couch, I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, the fear swirling around me like a tempest. Emma sat beside me, her presence a solid comfort in the chaos. "Hey," she said softly, "we'll get through this. You're not alone." But deep down, I felt the darkness creeping back in, a suffocating blanket that threatened to engulf me whole. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much worse. The police officer's words echoed in my mind like a sinister lullaby. "For now." Those two words carried a weight I couldn't shake off, filling me with a sense of impending dread. I sat on the couch, my fingers digging into the fabric, feeling every fiber as if it could somehow ground me in this reality. Emma sat beside me, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of how fragile my world had become. As the officers began their questioning, I tried to focus, recounting every detail I could remember about the man, his appearance, his behavior, the way his eyes seemed to glint with a mixture of obsession and anger. But even as I spoke, I felt a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. I was no longer just recounting an event, I was reliving a nightmare. "Ma'am, can you tell us exactly what he said to you?" one officer asked, jotting down notes in a small notepad. I took a deep breath, my heart racing as I recalled his voice, smooth yet menacing. He said he wanted to help me discover something dark within myself," I stammered, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. It felt like a threat, like he was saying there was something wrong with me. The officers exchanged glances, their expressions grave. We've had reports of similar behavior from other women in the area, the second officer said, his tone serious. This isn't the first time we've dealt with someone like him. We'll do our best to ensure your safety, but you need to be vigilant. Vigilant. The word hung in the air, a reminder that my sense of security had been shattered. As the officers continued to take notes, I found my gaze wandering to the window, the world outside looking deceptively normal. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street, and I felt an instinctive urge to pull the curtains shut. After what felt like an eternity, the officers wrapped up their questioning. We'll increase patrols in your area, and if you notice anything unusual, don't hesitate to call us, the first officer advised. Make sure to keep your doors locked and consider getting a security system installed. As they left, a wave of relief washed over me, mingling with the underlying anxiety that still gripped my chest. Thank you, I murmured, my voice small. Once the door closed behind them, Emma turned to me, her eyes filled with concern. Are you okay? I nodded, but the tremor in my hands betrayed my facade. I don't know. I just feel so exposed. You're not alone, she said firmly, taking my hands in hers. We'll figure this out together. Let's set up a safety plan. As we brainstormed ideas, I felt a mix of gratitude and guilt. I hated that Emma had to shoulder this burden, that my fear had woven itself into her life. We could install some cameras outside, she suggested, her voice steady. And I can spend the night if that makes you feel safer. I nodded, appreciating her offer, though a part of me hated that it had come to this. I glanced at my phone, half expecting another message, but there was nothing. I felt the anxiety clawing at me, a persistent reminder that the threat was still very real. Later that evening, as we prepared dinner, I tried to distract myself by focusing on the familiar routine. Chopping vegetables, stirring the sauce, and listening to Emma chatter about her day. But every sound outside, every car that passed, sent jolts of fear coursing through me. I was hyper-aware of every little thing, my senses heightened to the point of exhaustion. After dinner, Emma and I settled onto the couch, a movie playing in the background, though I barely registered the plot. I was too busy keeping an eye on the window, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Do you want to talk about something else? Emma suggested, sensing my unease. Like what? I replied, forcing a smile. Anything. We can play a game where you can tell me about your latest ideas for your posts. I hesitated, the thought of my once joyful creative outlet feeling tainted. I don't know if I can do that right now. I just don't feel inspired. She nodded, understanding that my world had shifted. That's okay. Just focus on taking care of yourself. We sat in silence, the tension between us palpable. I could feel the weight of my fear pressing down on both of us. As the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I glanced at the clock. It was past 10, and the world outside had grown quiet. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping at the window. My heart dropped, and I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Emma, I whispered, my voice trembling. She turned to me, alarm in her eyes. What? Do you hear that? We both listened intently, and the sound came again, a soft, rhythmic tapping that seemed to echo in the stillness of the night. Maybe it's just the wind, Emma suggested, though I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. No, it's not the wind, I insisted, rising from the couch and moving cautiously toward the window. Wait. Don't. Emma grabbed my arm, panic flickering in her eyes. What if it's him? I nodded, feeling a rush of fear. But what if it's something else? With trembling hands, I reached for the curtain, pulling it back just enough to peek outside. My heart raced as I scanned the darkness. What I saw made my blood run cold. The man stood just outside, illuminated by the glow of a nearby street lamp, his baseball cap casting a shadow over his face. He was staring directly at me, a twisted smile spreading across his lips. "Let me in, please," he called out, his voice sickly sweet. "I just want to talk." "Get away from the window," I hissed, backing away as fear gripped me like a vice. "What is it?" Emma demanded, her eyes wide. "It's him," I shouted, moving to lock the door, my fingers fumbling with the bolt. "He's back. He's right outside." Emma grabbed her phone, her face pale. "Call the police." I was already dialing as I glanced back at the window. The man had stepped closer, his eyes glinting with a manic intensity. "You can't hide from me. I know you're scared, but I can help you. You just have to let me in." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as he pressed his face against the glass, his features distorted and grotesque. "I can make you understand," he shouted, his voice echoing in the silence. I hung up the phone, my heart racing. "They're on their way," I said, my voice shaky. "Stay behind me," Emma ordered, positioning herself protectively in front of me as we faced the window. "Don't let him in." But I could feel my resolve crumbling. The sheer intensity of his gaze made me want to curl up and disappear. What if he tries to break in? I whispered, my voice laced with fear. "We can't let that happen," Emma replied, her voice steady, though I could see the tremor in her hands. The man continued to pound on the window, his face a mask of desperation. "I'm not a threat. I'm trying to help you. You need to trust me." But I didn't trust him. I couldn't. I felt my breath quickening as panic clawed at my throat. "Just stay calm," Emma urged, her eyes never leaving the man's face. "We have to wait for the police." Just then, I heard the sound of sirens approaching, their wails growing louder. The man turned, his expression shifting from desperation to fury as he realized help was on the way. "Don't think you can escape me," he shouted, his voice reverberating with rage. "I'll always find you." I felt a shiver run down my spine as he stepped back, the streetlight casting long shadows behind him. I thought for a moment he would flee, but instead, he stood there, watching us, a predator savoring its prey. Then, as the police cars pulled up outside, the man turned and ran into the darkness, disappearing into the night as quickly as he had come. I felt a mix of relief and terror as the officers rushed to our door. "Stay inside," one of them commanded, and I nodded, my heart racing as I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. The weight of the evening settled around me like a thick fog, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The police officers flooded into the living room, their presence both reassuring and overwhelming. I stood off to the side, clutching Emma's arm tightly as the reality of the situation began to set in. The adrenaline that had coursed through me moments before now ebbed away, leaving a heavy exhaustion in its wake. "Where did he go?" one officer asked, scanning the room with a keen gaze. "He ran that way," I stammered, pointing toward the front door, still slightly ajar from when we had locked it. "He was right outside the window." "Okay, stay calm. We're going to check the area," the officer assured me, his voice steady. He gestured to his partner, who nodded, and together they hurried outside, leaving me feeling oddly exposed in the wake of their departure. As soon as the door closed, I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding in my chest. "This can't be happening," I whispered, my voice trembling. Emma turned to me, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "We need to stay strong. They'll catch him," she said, though I could see the fear flickering in her eyes. "But what if they don't?" The thought gnawed at my mind, whispering dark possibilities. I felt trapped in my own home, as if the very walls that once offered me safety had become a prison. Moments later, the officers returned, their faces grave. "We didn't see anyone in the vicinity, but we'll keep patrols in the area throughout the night," one of them said, his tone reassuring yet serious. "If he returns, you need to call us immediately." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "What if he comes back tonight?" "Don't worry," Emma chimed in, squeezing my hand. "We'll keep the lights on and the doors locked. You're not alone in this." The officers offered a few more safety tips and then took their leave, the heavy door clicking shut behind them. As the silence enveloped us once more, I felt a chill creep through the room, amplifying the tension that hung in the air. "Let's try to get some rest," Emma suggested, though I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Maybe we can watch a movie or something." "Yeah, sure," I replied absently, moving back to the couch. I sank into the cushions, but the comfort they once provided felt hollow now. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside sent my heart racing again. We flipped through channels, but nothing captured my attention. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life, detached and fearful. Emma leaned against me, her warmth a small comfort, but even that couldn't shake the icy grip of anxiety that clung to me. "What if he really is obsessed with you?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to her, startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he knows where you live now. He's seen you. What if he keeps coming back? What if this doesn't just go away?" The gravity of her words settled heavily between us. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice shaking. "I thought being popular meant I was safe, that I was in control." Emma shook her head. "That's not how it works. Sometimes it attracts the wrong kind of attention. You have to be careful." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had reveled in my popularity, basking in the likes and comments, believing I was building a community. But now, I felt like a target. I had shared so much of my life online, and now it was all twisted against me. As the hours dragged on, I fought against the rising tide of panic. Every shadow felt sinister, and I began to feel the weight of my isolation. The walls of my home, once a refuge, now felt like they were closing in on me. "Let's talk about something else," Emma suggested, her voice a soothing balm against my growing anxiety. "What about your next post? What ideas do you have?" I forced a smile, but the thought of my usual creative outlets felt tainted. "I don't know. I thought maybe I could do something about self-care, but I'm not feeling very self-cared for right now." Emma laughed softly, though I could hear the concern in her voice. "You're allowed to take a break. Your mental health comes first." "Yeah," I replied, feeling a flicker of gratitude for her support. "But it's hard to think about that when I'm just trying to survive." "Then let's focus on that," she said firmly. "We'll get through this together." Eventually, the tension in the room eased slightly as we engaged in light conversation, but I remained hyper-aware of every sound. Each creak of the floorboards sent a ripple of dread through me. As the night wore on, I finally managed to doze off on the couch, lulled into a false sense of security by Emma's presence. But my sleep was restless, filled with nightmares of faceless figures lurking in the shadows, whispering my name in taunting voices. I awoke with a start, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was dark, the silence unsettling. I squinted at the clock. It was just past 3 in the morning. The weight of fear settled back over me like a heavy blanket. "Emma?" I whispered, my voice barely breaking the stillness. There was no response. I turned to see if she was still asleep beside me, but the space was empty. Panic surged through me. "Emma!" I called louder, sitting up quickly, my eyes scanning the room. The house felt eerily quiet, and a shiver ran down my spine. Where could she have gone? I pulled myself off the couch and padded quietly through the living room, my heart racing. "Emma!" I whispered again, my voice echoing in the stillness. I moved cautiously toward the kitchen, my senses heightened. The shadows seemed to dance along the walls, and every sound felt amplified. My breath quickened as I approached the hallway that led to her room. Just as I reached the doorway, I heard a noise, a faint rustling coming from the back porch. I froze, straining to hear. My heart pounded in my chest as I remembered the man's face pressed against the glass, his twisted smile. "Emma?" I called again, trying to keep my voice steady, but the tremor was unmistakable. There was no answer, just that soft rustling sound. I felt a chill creep up my spine, and I hesitated, torn between checking on her and retreating to a safer place. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a movement, a shadow shifting in the darkness outside. My breath hitched as I took a step back, instinctively reaching for my phone to call for help. Suddenly, the back door swung open, and a figure stepped inside, silhouetted against the dim light of the porch. My heart stopped as I realized it was Emma, her face pale and filled with dread. "Get back!" I shouted, adrenaline surging as I raised my phone to call the police. "Wait! It's me!" Emma cried, her eyes wide with fear. "There's something out there." "What do you mean?" "I saw him," she gasped, her breath hitching. "He's in the yard." A cold wave of dread washed over me. "Are you sure?" "Yes." I was looking out the window and, before she could finish, a loud crash echoed from the back porch, cutting her off. My heart raced as I turned toward the sound, a primal instinct pushing me to protect her. "Stay behind me," I ordered, stepping forward, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. The noise grew louder, and I felt a surge of panic coursing through me. "Call the police. Now!" Emma fumbled for her phone, and in that moment, I felt the unmistakable presence of dread creeping closer. We both turned toward the back door, and I could see him, shadows moving just outside, the shape of a man lurking in the dark, illuminated only by the faint glow from the street lamp. "Let me in," he called again, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I just want to help you." The fear coursing through me turned to ice as I recognized that sickly sweet tone, the same words he had used before. "We're calling the police." I shouted, my voice steadying despite the terror roiling inside me. "Don't do that," he replied, his voice turning sharp, menacing. "You need me. You don't understand what you're dealing with." Emma was trembling beside me, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" "Stay back," I urged, my mind racing. We couldn't let him in. I wouldn't give him that power. Suddenly, the man lunged forward, slamming against the door, and I gasped, stumbling back as I felt the impact reverberate through the frame. "You can't escape me," he shouted, his voice laced with fury. "I'll find a way in. Call for help." I urged Emma, my heart racing as I reached for the door, slamming it shut as hard as I could. The sound of his fists pounding against the wood echoed through the house, a sinister rhythm that sent shivers down my spine. "Let me in," he demanded, his voice a chaotic mix of anger and desperation. Emma had her phone out, her fingers shaking as she dialed. "Please, hurry." I pressed my back against the door, trying to brace it against his relentless assault. My mind raced with fear and adrenaline, every second feeling like an eternity. I could hear the sirens in the distance, but would they arrive in time? The man continued to pound on the door, his voice rising in fury. "You think you're safe? You're not. You can't hide from me. Get away from the door." I shouted, my heart pounding in my chest. "Help is on the way," Emma cried, her voice breaking as she pressed the phone against her ear. "Please, just hold on." The pounding intensified, the sound reverberating through the walls, and I felt my resolve beginning to falter. "Emma, stay close." Just then, I heard the unmistakable sound of sirens approaching, their wails growing louder, but the man showed no signs of letting up. "You'll regret this," he shouted, and with one final blow, the door buckled under the pressure, a sickening crack echoing through the room. I felt a surge of fear as the door held, just barely, but I knew it wouldn't last much longer. "They're almost here," I urged, trying to buy us time. "Please," Emma cried, her face pale and filled with terror. "Just hold on." Suddenly, the door burst open with a force that sent me sprawling backward. I fell to the ground as the man surged into the room, his face twisted in rage. Before I could react, the police rushed in behind him, shouting commands as they tackled the man to the ground. "Get down. Hands where we can see them." I lay frozen on the floor, watching as the officers subdued him, my heart racing in my chest. The chaos unfolded in a blur as they wrestled him away, securing him in handcuffs. "Are you okay?" one officer asked, kneeling beside me as the other officers pulled the man away. I think so," I stammered, still in shock. Emma rushed to my side, her eyes wide with concern. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm fine," I said, my voice shaky. "Just scared." The officer nodded, his expression serious. "You did the right thing by calling us. We're going to take him into custody and ensure you're safe." As they led the man away, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But beneath that relief lay a churning sense of dread. What would happen next? Would this truly be over, or was it just the beginning of a darker chapter? The chaos began to fade, but I felt a new wave of anxiety creep in as I watched the officers escort the man out of my home. He turned briefly, his eyes locking onto mine with a chilling intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "You'll regret this," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. I felt a cold dread settle in my chest. What did he mean? Was this really over? As the door closed behind them, sealing off the nightmare that had invaded my sanctuary, Emma wrapped her arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. "You're safe now," she whispered, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. "Are we really?" I murmured against her shoulder, my mind racing with fear and disbelief. "I think so," she replied, pulling back to look into my eyes. "But we need to stay vigilant. We can't let our guard down." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air as we both sank onto the couch, the tension still thick between us. The bright lights of the police car outside bathed the room in a surreal glow, a constant reminder of the chaos that had just erupted. The officers returned moments later, one of them holding a notepad, his expression serious. "We'd like to ask you a few questions," he said, his voice steady. "It's important we get as much information as possible." I nodded, feeling my stomach twist with anxiety. "Of course. Can you describe what happened tonight?" I took a deep breath, my mind racing back to the moments that had led us here. He was watching me. I saw him at the window before, I explained, the memory flooding back in vivid detail. He started sending me messages online, threatening me, and then he showed up at my house. The officer nodded, jotting down notes. "Did he say anything specific that stood out to you?" I hesitated, the memory of his voice echoing in my mind. "He said I would regret calling the police. He was angry. I felt like he wanted to hurt me." The officer looked at me carefully, his brow furrowed with concern. "You did the right thing by calling us. We're going to take this seriously and ensure your safety moving forward." As he continued to ask questions, I felt Emma's hand slip into mine, her grip a comforting anchor. I answered as best as I could, but the fear still gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. What if he came back? What if he had friends? After what felt like an eternity, the officers wrapped up their questions. "We're going to need to keep an eye on you for a while," one officer said. "We recommend you stay alert and avoid sharing your location online." "Can you give us more information about him?" Emma asked, her voice steady despite the fear lurking in her eyes. The officer hesitated, glancing at his partner before returning his gaze to us. "We believe he may have a history of this kind of behavior. We're working on a more extensive background check, but we can't disclose everything at this moment." My heart sank at his words. "How can I be sure he won't come back?" "We'll increase patrols in the area and keep you informed of any developments. We recommend changing your routines and being cautious about your online presence," he replied. "If you feel threatened at any point, don't hesitate to call us again." I nodded, but doubt hung heavily in the air. I felt exposed and vulnerable, as if every shadow could hold danger. After they left, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Emma and I sat together on the couch, the silence now uncomfortable, laden with unspoken fears. "I can't believe this happened," I said finally, breaking the tension. "I know. It's terrifying," Emma replied, her voice small. "But you're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." I appreciated her support, but deep down, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. I had opened my life to the world, sharing my journey online, but now that same openness felt like a vulnerability. What if he finds out where I am? I whispered, panic rising in my chest again. What if he comes back? Emma shifted closer, her warmth enveloping me. "We need to think practically. Let's change the locks tomorrow and get some security cameras. We can also set up a safety plan." Her words grounded me slightly, giving me something to focus on. "You're right. I just feel so trapped." "We'll get through this," she reassured me. "But we need to take action." As night deepened around us, we began discussing practical steps to enhance our security. We made a list of things to do, changing the locks, installing cameras, and even creating a code word for help, just in case. With every plan we made, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Taking control of the situation, however small, felt empowering amidst the chaos. But as the hours wore on, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing in around me. Every creak of the house felt amplified, every whisper of wind outside a reminder of my vulnerability. "Emma?" I called softly, not wanting to disturb the fragile calm. Yeah, she answered from her room, her voice gentle. Can you come in here? A moment later, she appeared in my doorway, her silhouette framed by the dim light. What's wrong? Everything. I hesitated, searching for the right words. I can't shake this feeling that he's still out there. She nodded, crossing the room to sit beside me on the bed. It's normal to feel that way after what happened. But you're safe here. I won't let anything happen to you. Her presence was a balm against my anxiety, and I leaned into her side, feeling her warmth seep into my bones. Thanks for being here, I whispered. Always, she replied, wrapping an arm around me. You're not alone. Eventually, I drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by dreams of dark figures lurking outside my window, the air thick with impending danger. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, panic flooding my senses. It was just a dream, I reminded myself, but the darkness felt real, suffocating. I glanced at the clock. It was just past 5 in the morning. Emma? I whispered, the panic bubbling back up. Yeah, she murmured, her voice groggy. Can you stay with me for a while? I don't want to be alone. She sat up, rubbing her eyes before nodding. Of course. Let's talk. As we spoke, I felt the weight of my fears begin to lift slightly. Sharing my worries with her made the darkness feel a little less oppressive. But even as the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow through the window, the underlying tension remained. We had a plan in place, but the fear still lingered like a specter haunting me, a constant reminder of the vulnerability I had exposed through my online life. Tomorrow, we'll take the first steps, Emma promised, her voice resolute. We'll get those locks changed and the cameras installed. You'll see, we'll reclaim your space. I nodded, though doubt still lingered in my mind. What if he's already out there? What if he's watching us? Then we'll be ready, she assured me, her eyes fierce. We'll make sure we're prepared. As the day wore on, I tried to push the fear aside, focusing instead on the small tasks at hand. We spent the morning gathering supplies, creating a checklist, and discussing potential routes to safety. But as the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, the shadows began to creep back in. The air grew thick with anxiety, and every sound outside felt magnified. Do you think he's still out there? I asked Emma, my voice barely above a whisper as we sat in the living room. I don't know, she replied, her expression serious. But we can't let that stop us from living our lives. We need to stay vigilant, but also find ways to feel safe again. Right, I said, forcing a smile even though my heart raced. Let's watch a movie or something. We settled in, but my mind kept drifting back to the shadows outside, the lurking danger that felt ever present. As the film played on, I struggled to focus, each frame reminding me of my vulnerability. I felt like a marionette, my strings pulled tight by unseen hands. Just as I started to relax, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, the sound slicing through the tension like a knife. I glanced at it, my heart racing. It was a message from an unknown number. You can't escape me. I'll always be watching. Panic surged through me as I read the words, my breath hitching in my throat. Emma! I gasped, my voice rising in terror. She glanced at the screen, her expression shifting from confusion to horror as she read the message. Oh my God, she whispered, her eyes wide. What do we do? I don't know. I stammered, my heart racing. I thought he was in custody. I thought we were safe. Emma grabbed her phone, her hands trembling as she dialed the police. We need to report this. Now. Please hurry, I begged, my voice cracking. As she spoke to the operator, my mind spiraled into a pit of despair. How could this be happening again? The feeling of dread wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud, the walls closing in as I struggled to breathe. Stay calm, Emma urged, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Help is on the way. But deep down, I felt the darkness closing in, and I knew this was just the beginning of a far more terrifying ordeal than I had ever anticipated. The seconds felt like hours as Emma spoke to the police, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around us. I clutched my phone in trembling hands, the screen illuminating my face in the dim light of the living room. I felt trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. Please, Emma said into the phone. He just sent her a threatening message. We thought he was in custody, but we're not sure now. Her brow furrowed in concentration, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. I could barely process her words as I replayed the message in my mind. You can't escape me. I'll always be watching. It echoed in my thoughts, haunting me like a ghost. My breathing quickened, and I fought to keep my panic at bay. Stay with me, I whispered to Emma, my voice shaking. I can't do this alone. Of course, I'm right here, she replied, her gaze fixed on the door as if she expected it to burst open at any moment. When she finally hung up, her expression was grave. They're sending someone over right now, she said, but her voice lacked the comfort I desperately needed. Do you think he knows where we are? I asked, my heart racing. I don't know, she admitted. But we have to stay alert. Lock the doors and turn off any lights. We can't let him see us. I sprang into action, my fingers fumbling as I secured the locks and drew the curtains tightly. The darkness outside pressed in around us, amplifying the fear that gripped my chest. I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears, drowning out the quiet hum of the world beyond our walls. Do you have any idea who he is? Emma asked, her voice low. I wish I did, I replied, frustration bubbling to the surface. I never wanted this. I just wanted to share my life, not become a target. Let's focus on what we can control, Emma urged, her tone firm. We'll get through this. Moments later, we heard a knock at the door that sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through my veins. That's them, I whispered, and we exchanged a glance filled with unspoken fear. I approached the door slowly, peeking through the peephole to confirm it was the police. My stomach twisted at the thought of opening the door to strangers, men with badges who might be able to help but could also expose us to the danger lurking outside. Please, open up, a voice called from the other side. It's the police. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and opened it just wide enough to peek out. 2 officers stood there, their expressions serious and alert. Are you okay? One asked, glancing over my shoulder into the house. I stepped back, allowing them to enter. No, I'm not, I said, my voice trembling. He just sent me a message. He's supposed to be in custody. The officers exchanged a glance before one of them took out a notepad. Can you show us the message? I fumbled with my phone, my hand shaking as I handed it to the officer. He read the message, his brow furrowing in concern. We need to take this seriously, he said, looking at his partner. Can you tell us more about him? What do you know? The other officer asked, his voice steady. He's a stranger, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know anything about him except what he said online. He started as a follower and then became obsessed. The officers nodded, jotting down notes. We'll file this report and escalate it to our superiors, one said. In the meantime, we'll have patrols in your area. You should consider staying with someone you trust. I can't leave, I said, panic rising. What if he finds me? You're safer here with extra security, the officer assured me. But we need to keep a close eye on your online presence. No more posting about your location, and limit who can see your posts. Emma squeezed my hand, her grip reassuring but filled with urgency. We will, she said, looking back at the officers. We'll do whatever it takes to stay safe. The officers shared more safety tips, suggesting we change our routines and keep our doors locked at all times. They assured us that they would do everything possible to keep us safe, but their words felt inadequate against the growing darkness. As they left, I felt a mix of relief and dread. They were taking this seriously, but part of me wondered if that was enough. Let's go over everything we can do to feel safer, Emma suggested, pulling out her phone to jot down notes. We need to have a plan. I nodded, appreciating her focus. What about the security cameras? Should we get them installed immediately? Definitely, she agreed. And let's change the locks first thing in the morning. With each idea we brainstormed, I felt a slight sense of control returning. We made lists of things to do, practical steps to reclaim my space and my life. But as the hours slipped by, the shadows deepened around us. Even with our plans in place, the fear lingered, gnawing at my insides like a persistent itch. The night wore on, each creak of the house amplifying my anxiety. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of what could happen next. Emma? I whispered, the darkness pressing in around me. Yeah, she answered from her room, her voice soft. Can you come back? I don't want to be alone. A moment later, she was by my side, her presence a calming force amidst the storm of my thoughts. You're okay, she reassured me, her hand resting gently on my arm. I don't know how to shake this feeling, I admitted, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. What if he really is watching us? We'll be ready if he tries to come back, Emma promised, her voice steady. You have me, and we're going to face this together. As she spoke, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. With each passing moment, I reminded myself that I was not alone in this battle. But as I drifted into an uneasy sleep, the fear whispered promises of a dark future, a future I desperately hoped to escape. The darkness pressed in around us like a thick fog, every shadow seeming to stretch and shift as I lay in bed, unable to find solace. My thoughts whirled like a storm, each scenario more horrifying than the last. What if the messages were just the beginning? What if he escalated from online threats to real-world actions? I felt like a bird in a cage, trapped and powerless against an unseen predator. Emma stayed by my side, her presence a small beacon of comfort. We talked in hushed tones, strategizing like military generals preparing for an impending battle. Each idea we shared was a lifeline, a thread to cling to in the overwhelming tide of fear. Let's create a code word, I suggested, my voice barely a whisper. Something we can use if we feel threatened. That's a great idea, Emma replied, nodding. What about safety? If I say it, we know something's wrong. We agreed on several safety measures, including checking the locks multiple times before bed, installing security cameras as soon as possible, and even creating a list of people we could trust to help us if things got worse. But no matter how many plans we devised, A gnawing feeling settled in the pit of my stomach, a sense of inevitability that I couldn't shake off. As the hours dragged on, sleep remained elusive. I found myself slipping in and out of a restless state, haunted by nightmares of dark figures lurking outside my window, eyes glinting with malice, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Each time I opened my eyes, the weight of the darkness felt heavier, and I could swear I heard whispers echoing in the silence. "Emma?" I called out into the stillness, my voice trembling. "I'm right here," she replied, her voice soothing. "Try to relax. We'll get through this." But relaxation felt impossible. My mind raced with memories of the messages, the suffocating dread that came with them, and the unsettling knowledge that someone was watching me, waiting for the right moment to pounce. Finally, just as dawn began to break, casting a pale light through the curtains, I heard a noise outside, a rustle that made my heart skip a beat. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, adrenaline surging through me. Emma nodded, her eyes wide. "Stay quiet," she urged. We both sat up, straining to listen. The sound came again, a soft thud, as if something had brushed against the side of the house. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in my ears like a war drum. "Do you think it's him?" I asked, my throat dry. "I don't know," Emma replied, her voice low and steady. "But we should check." Cautiously, we made our way to the living room, where the faint light of dawn barely illuminated the space. Emma peered through the curtains, her breath held tight. I stood beside her, my heart racing, the tension thick in the air. "What do you see?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Nothing," she said, frowning. "But it's hard to tell. We should be careful." We slowly moved to the front door, every creak of the floorboards echoing loudly in the silence. I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembling. "Do you think we should call the police again?" "Let's just look outside first," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension. I took a deep breath and turned the knob, the door creaking open slightly. We both peered out into the morning light. The street was empty, the world around us still waking up from the night. "Maybe it was just the wind," Emma suggested, but the doubt lingered in her voice. "Or a stray animal," I replied, but even as I said it, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The feeling of being watched persisted, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. As the day wore on, we kept our eyes peeled, watching every movement in our neighborhood. The police hadn't arrived with a solution, they had simply added an extra layer of fear. "Let's go to the store and grab some supplies," Emma suggested, her voice brightening a little. "We need food, and maybe some pepper spray for protection." I nodded, grateful for the distraction. "That sounds good." We quickly dressed, keeping the curtains drawn as we prepared to leave. As we stepped out into the daylight, the sun felt strangely foreign, illuminating our path but casting long shadows that seemed to follow us. As we made our way to the store, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Every car that passed felt like a potential threat, every stranger a possible enemy. I gripped the straps of my bag tightly, my knuckles white against the fabric. Inside the store, we moved quickly through the aisles, gathering the essentials. Emma picked up a can of pepper spray, and I couldn't help but feel a flicker of reassurance. "At least we'll have something if we need it," she said, her voice steady. But as we checked out, I caught sight of a figure out of the corner of my eye. A man in a hoodie stood by the entrance, his head bowed, but something about him made my heart race. My instinct screamed at me, urging me to leave, to run. "Emma," I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. "That guy." I don't like the way he's looking at us. She turned to look, and I saw the concern etch itself across her face. Let's hurry, she said, her tone urgent. We paid quickly, my fingers trembling as I fumbled with my wallet. As we exited the store, I glanced back, my heart pounding. The man was still there, watching us with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. Let's go, I urged, breaking into a jog. Emma matched my pace, glancing over her shoulder. He's just a guy, she said, but her voice held an edge of fear. Just a guy who's been following us. I shot back, and we hurried down the sidewalk, adrenaline coursing through our veins. Once we reached the safety of our apartment, we locked the door behind us, the click echoing in the silence. I leaned against the wall, my heart racing as I tried to catch my breath. Did you see him? I asked, my voice shaky. Emma nodded, her expression serious. We need to stay vigilant. This is not just in our heads. As the day stretched on, the tension in the air felt almost palpable. We kept the lights dimmed and the curtains drawn, huddled together on the couch, each creak of the building causing our hearts to race. When night fell, the shadows crept back in, and the fear returned, wrapping around us like a cold embrace. I felt as though I were living in a waking nightmare, each moment heavier than the last. Emma, I whispered, my voice breaking. What if he comes for us? What if he's already in our heads? Her hand found mine, squeezing tightly. We'll be ready, she said, but her voice lacked the certainty I desperately craved. As sleep finally began to claim me, I held onto her hand, the warmth of her grip a fragile tether to reality. But the nightmares returned, the same dark figure looming closer, reaching for me with cold, unyielding hands. I woke with a start, heart pounding, the room cloaked in darkness. I could have sworn I heard a noise, a whisper, a rustle, coming from outside. My breath hitched in my throat as I glanced at Emma, who lay sleeping peacefully beside me, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Please, I whispered into the night, don't let it be real. But the feeling of dread lingered, a heavy weight pressing down as I struggled to calm my racing heart. And as the hours dragged on, I knew that this was only the beginning. The darkness felt thicker now, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket as I lay awake, every rustle of the night sending jolts of fear coursing through my veins. I kept glancing at the clock, its numbers illuminating the room in an eerie glow, marking the time creeping closer to midnight. With each passing minute, I felt the world outside becoming more ominous. The shadows seemed to shift and breathe, growing longer and more menacing in the flickering light of my phone screen. I turned on my side, trying to find a comfortable position, but the weight of dread made it nearly impossible. Emma? I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Yeah, she murmured, stirring slightly. I can't sleep, I confessed, my heart pounding in my chest. I keep thinking about him, about what he could do. She turned to face me, her eyes still heavy with sleep but filled with concern. I know it's hard, but we're safe here. We locked the doors, and the police are on alert. I know, I replied, forcing a breath to steady my voice. But it feels like there's a shadow just waiting for the right moment. Let's try to distract ourselves, she suggested. We could watch something, or maybe listen to music. I hesitated, unsure if that would truly help. What if he's already outside, waiting? Emma sat up, determination in her gaze. We can't let fear control us. We need to fight back against it. Let's find something to keep our minds off this. I nodded slowly, and she reached for her laptop, pulling it onto her lap. The screen illuminated the room, casting a soft glow around us. As she clicked through options, I tried to focus on the light, but my mind kept drifting back to the threats. After a few moments, she settled on a nature documentary, and we watched the calming visuals of lush forests and exotic wildlife. I let the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves wash over me, hoping it would distract my racing thoughts. But even as I watched, a sense of dread lingered in the back of my mind, gnawing at my nerves. The documentary was meant to be soothing, yet the serene beauty of the world felt far removed from the nightmare that had invaded my life. "Look at that," Emma said, pointing at the screen. "A jaguar. Isn't it beautiful?" I forced a smile, but my heart wasn't in it. "Yeah, it is," I replied, my voice lacking enthusiasm. Minutes turned into an hour, and as the documentary continued, I felt myself drifting. Just as I was about to close my eyes, a loud bang echoed from outside, jolting me awake. My heart raced, adrenaline flooding my system. "What was that?" I whispered, my eyes wide with fear. Emma looked alarmed. "I don't know." "Let's check." We quietly tiptoed to the window, careful not to make any noise. I peered through the curtain, my heart pounding against my ribs. Outside, the street was illuminated by a street lamp, casting long shadows, but there was no sign of anyone. "Maybe it was a branch or something," Emma suggested, her voice steady but her eyes betraying her fear. "Or maybe it was him," I replied, my throat dry. We decided to retreat back to the living room, trying to shake the feeling of impending doom. I curled up on the couch, my knees drawn to my chest, while Emma sat beside me, her arm draped protectively over my shoulders. As the hours ticked by, the documentary faded into silence, and a thick stillness enveloped us. Every creak of the house felt amplified, the walls seeming to breathe with us. "Let's talk about something else," Emma suggested, her voice breaking the oppressive silence. "Anything but this." I nodded, grateful for the distraction. "Okay, what about the time we went camping? Remember how we got lost?" She chuckled softly. "How could I forget?" We wandered in circles for hours. As we reminisced about the camping trip, our laughter began to fill the room, cutting through the darkness. We shared stories of old times, embarrassing moments, silly adventures, and plans for the future that felt so far away now. But as we laughed, a noise interrupted us, a faint rustling sound coming from outside, growing louder, almost like footsteps. My laughter faded, replaced by a cold chill that crept up my spine. "Did you hear that?" I whispered, my heart racing again. Emma nodded, her expression turning serious. "Yes. It sounded like footsteps." We fell silent, straining to listen. The sound grew closer, a slow, deliberate crunching of gravel echoing in the stillness of the night. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the fear suffocating as I tried to process what was happening. "Should we call the police?" I asked, my voice trembling. Emma's eyes widened, and she nodded. "Yes, definitely. We need to be safe." I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking as I dialed the number. The line rang, each tone sending another wave of panic through me. "Please pick up," I murmured, glancing nervously at the window. The footsteps grew louder, a steady rhythm that matched my racing heart. Finally, a voice answered. 911. "What's your emergency?" I quickly explained our situation, trying to keep my voice steady as I described the strange sounds outside. "I think someone is out there. I'm scared." "Stay on the line," the operator said, their tone calm and reassuring. "We have units on the way. Can you lock all doors and stay away from the windows?" "Yes, I've done that," I replied, my heart pounding as I moved to the door, double-checking the lock. As I hung up, I turned to Emma, panic washing over me. "They're sending someone, but what if he gets here first?" "Then we're ready," she said, determination in her voice. "We have each other." Just then, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed felt deafening, a heavy blanket of uncertainty settling over us. I held my breath, straining to hear any sound that might indicate who or what was out there. Then, without warning, the doorbell rang, shattering the silence and sending a fresh wave of fear coursing through me. "That can't be the police," I whispered, my voice shaking. "They didn't say they were coming yet." Emma's eyes widened. "What if it's him?" "Stay back," I urged, inching towards the door, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I'll check." I peered through the peephole, my heart racing. Outside, the darkness obscured everything but a vague outline of a figure standing on the porch. I couldn't see their face, but my instinct screamed at me to run. "Who is it?" I called, my voice trembling. "Delivery," a voice replied, muffled through the door. "I have a package for you." "A package?" I whispered, glancing at Emma. "We didn't order anything." "Maybe it's a mistake," she said, her voice low. "But we shouldn't open the door. It could be a trap." "Exactly," I replied, my heart pounding. "Stay back." I took a step away from the door, my pulse racing as I tried to process the situation. Should I call the police again? I asked, glancing back at Emma. "Yes," she urged. "And we need to be careful." As I dialed again, the figure outside shifted, and I caught a glimpse of something shiny in their hand, a knife. I gasped, my heart dropping. "They're armed," I whispered, my breath quickening. "Get away from the door," Emma urged, grabbing my arm and pulling me back. "Help is on the way," I said, my voice shaky as I spoke into the phone. "There's someone outside. They might be dangerous." "Stay inside and lock everything," the operator instructed. "Help is already in the area." I hung up, panic rising as I glanced at the door again. The figure was still there, their presence like a dark cloud hanging over us. "We need to find a place to hide," I whispered urgently. "Let's go to the bedroom," Emma suggested, her eyes wide with fear. We slipped away from the living room, creeping down the hallway toward the bedroom. As we moved, I could hear the faint sound of the door rattling, a low thud that sent shivers down my spine. "Stay quiet," Emma urged, her voice barely above a whisper as we reached the bedroom door. We quickly locked it behind us, my heart racing as I scanned the room for a place to hide. "Under the bed?" I suggested, but Emma shook her head. "No, too exposed." "What about the closet?" We hurried to the closet, pulling the door open and stepping inside. I felt the cool air rush over me as we crouched in the dark, our breaths quiet but rapid. Time seemed to stretch as we listened for any sounds outside. The rattling of the door had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that settled heavily over us. My heart thundered in my ears, and I could feel Emma's warm presence beside me, our shoulders touching as we huddled together in the darkness. "We'll be okay," she whispered, trying to reassure us both. "Help is coming." But the uncertainty gnawed at me, an unsettling sense of dread that clung to my bones. What if the police didn't arrive in time? What if we were truly alone against whoever was out there? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the apartment, the sound reverberating through the walls. I jumped, clutching Emma's hand tightly. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I don't know," she replied, her breath shaky. "We have to stay quiet." The silence returned, stretching on like an eternity. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, every second feeling like a lifetime. Then I heard it again, a soft scratching sound, like fingernails dragging against the wood. My stomach dropped. "He's trying to get in," I breathed, fear flooding my senses. "Stay calm," Emma whispered, but her voice quivered. We held our breath, the scratching growing louder, more frantic. I could almost feel the presence of the figure outside, their intent dark and malevolent. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the scratching stopped. The silence felt deafening, an oppressive weight pressing down on us. I exchanged a terrified glance with Emma, her eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. "Do you think he's gone?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I don't know," she replied, her voice low and shaky. "We should wait a little longer." Minutes ticked by, each one dragging painfully. I could feel the tension coiling tighter around us, the fear nearly suffocating. Then, finally, a new sound pierced the silence, the unmistakable sound of sirens wailing in the distance. Relief flooded through me, a tide washing away the fear that had gripped me for so long. "Help is here," I whispered, tears of relief filling my eyes. But just as the sound grew closer, I heard another noise, shouting, urgent voices raised outside our apartment. I could hardly breathe, my heart racing. "Get down," someone yelled, followed by a loud crash. The noise reverberated through the walls, shaking the floor beneath us. "What's happening?" Emma gasped, her grip tightening around my hand. "I don't know," I replied, fear consuming me once again. We listened intently, the chaos outside growing louder. There were shouts, footsteps pounding against the ground, and the sounds of something heavy being dragged. "Is it the police?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "I hope so," I replied, my throat dry. The chaos continued for what felt like an eternity, and I could hardly contain my fear. Would they find us? Were we truly safe? Just when I thought I might burst from the tension, there was a loud bang at our bedroom door, causing us both to jump. "Police! Open up," a voice shouted. I exchanged a panicked glance with Emma. "It's them," I whispered, relief flooding through me. "Are you okay?" the officer called, urgency in their voice. "Yes," I shouted back, my voice trembling. "We're in here." "Stay where you are." "We're coming in," they replied, and I could hear the sound of metal scraping against wood. With a swift motion, the door swung open, and the light from the hallway flooded the room. A group of officers entered, their expressions serious as they took in the scene. "Are you both all right?" one officer asked, their voice firm but kind. "Yes," I replied, my voice shaky. "We heard noises, and we were scared." "Smart move hiding in here," another officer said, glancing around the room. "We're securing the area." "You're safe now." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by a flood of emotions. "What happened?" I asked, my voice breaking. "There was an individual reported in the area. We believe he may have tried to gain entry into your apartment," the officer explained. "We have a unit on him now." The reality of their words crashed over me like a tidal wave. "He was trying to get in," I whispered, dread creeping back into my heart. "Is he still outside?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "We're handling it," the officer assured us. "You're not in danger anymore." As they began to assess the situation, I felt a sense of safety return, but the shadow of fear lingered at the edges of my mind. "Can you stay with us for a moment?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," the officer replied, their expression softening. "We'll make sure you're both safe." As the officers checked the apartment, I felt Emma's hand squeeze mine tightly. "We made it," she whispered, her voice shaky but filled with relief. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. The fear had been pushed back, but it still loomed, ready to return. And as I glanced at the officers moving through our apartment, a new thought settled in my mind: this darkness was far from finished. As the officers secured the apartment, I could hear their hushed voices discussing the situation. My mind was still racing, replaying the terrifying moments that had just unfolded. I glanced at Emma, who was visibly shaken, her eyes wide with fear but filled with a flicker of hope now that help had arrived. "Can you tell us what happened?" one of the officers, a tall woman with a stern expression, asked as she approached us. I nodded, trying to steady my voice. "We started hearing strange noises outside. It sounded like someone was trying to get in." Emma chimed in, "And then we heard the footsteps, and we got scared." The officer nodded, taking notes as she listened intently. "It's understandable. You did the right thing by staying quiet and finding a place to hide." As she spoke, another officer was checking the locks on the front door and examining the living room for any signs of forced entry. I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude for their presence, yet a lingering anxiety curled in my stomach. "Have you had any previous incidents?" the officer asked, looking back at us. "No, this is the first time," I replied, my heart still racing. "I've been getting strange messages online, but I didn't think it would escalate like this." "What kind of messages?" the officer pressed, her expression serious. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my experiences flood back. They were threats, strangers saying they would come for me. I didn't take them seriously at first, but now I'm not so sure. "Thank you for sharing that," she said, jotting down more notes. "We'll need to report this and see if we can trace those messages. Your safety is our priority." Emma and I exchanged worried glances. The idea that my online presence could have drawn this danger so close was almost too much to bear. "Is there anywhere safe we can go?" Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. The officer glanced at her partner, who had just finished checking the perimeter of the apartment. "We can arrange for you both to stay at a safe house until we can ensure this threat is neutralized." I felt a rush of relief. "That sounds like a good idea," I said. The thought of being away from here, where I felt so vulnerable, was comforting. "Let's just take a few minutes to ensure everything is clear," the officer said, turning back to continue her assessment. As I sat on the couch, I felt the adrenaline begin to fade, leaving a heavy exhaustion in its wake. I rubbed my eyes, trying to process everything that had happened. The room felt stifling, filled with an electric tension that made my skin crawl. "Do you think he'll come back?" Emma whispered, her voice low as she leaned closer to me. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle on my shoulders. "But I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching." "Let's not think about that right now," she urged, her eyes darting toward the door as if she expected it to burst open at any moment. "We're safe. The police are here." The officers continued their work, moving from room to room, checking every nook and cranny. I watched them, grateful but anxious. Would they truly be able to protect us? Just then, one of the officers returned, a look of concern etched on his face. "We need to discuss something," he said, his tone serious. I felt my stomach drop. "What is it?" "We didn't find any signs of forced entry, but there's evidence that someone was watching your apartment from the outside," he explained. "Footprints and some disturbed foliage in the yard." My heart raced again as I processed his words. "So, he was really out there?" "Yes," the officer confirmed, nodding. "And we're still trying to track him down. But we believe he may have fled when he realized the police were coming. Can you assure us we're safe?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The officer looked at her, his expression softening. "We're doing everything we can. The neighborhood is being monitored, and we'll have patrols in the area for the next few days." "Thank you," I said, feeling a small sense of comfort in his words. As they continued to discuss their next steps, I turned to Emma. "We can't go back to normal after this, can we?" "No," she replied, her voice heavy with realization. "Everything has changed." Once the officers finished their initial investigation, they assured us that help was on the way to take us to the safe house. They instructed us to pack a few essentials, but to keep it minimal. I felt a strange sense of urgency as I moved around the apartment, grabbing clothes, my phone charger, and a few personal items. As I packed, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different, haunted and weary, with dark circles under her eyes. I barely recognized myself, the stress of the last few days etched into every line on my face. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, noticing my distraction. I can't believe this is happening," I admitted, trying to hold back tears. "This isn't how I imagined my life." "I know," she said softly, moving closer. "But we'll get through this together. You're not alone." I nodded, grateful for her presence, but the thought of the unknown loomed over me like a dark cloud. As we finished packing, the officers returned to let us know that the transport vehicle was ready. "Are you both ready?" one officer asked, glancing at our bags. "Yeah," I said, forcing a brave smile. As we stepped outside, the night air felt cool against my skin, but it was tinged with a lingering sense of unease. The area was bathed in the glow of police lights, the blue and red flashing across the street like some surreal nightmare. "Stay close to us," one of the officers instructed, leading us toward the vehicle. I held Emma's hand tightly, trying to keep my fear at bay as we climbed into the back of the police SUV. The doors locked shut, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Where are we going?" I asked, glancing at the officers. "To a secure location where you'll be safe," one of them replied. "We'll explain everything when we get there." The vehicle pulled away from our apartment, and I watched as the familiar sights of my neighborhood faded into the distance. I felt a sense of loss wash over me, the home I had built, the life I had known, slipping away. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible above the hum of the engine. I nodded, though the truth was that I felt anything but okay. I keep thinking about what might happen next." The officer driving turned to us briefly, concern etched on his face. "Just remember, you're safe now. We won't let anything happen to you." As we drove further away, the weight of uncertainty settled heavily on my chest. I glanced out the window, watching the world blur by, a mix of streetlights and shadows. The night felt alive, and yet I was left feeling numb, disconnected from everything familiar. The vehicle finally came to a stop in front of a discreet-looking building tucked away from the main road. The officers led us inside, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me as the doors closed behind us, sealing us off from the outside world. Inside, the atmosphere was different, calm, almost sterile. A few officers stood by, their expressions serious but welcoming. "Welcome to the safe house," one of them said, gesturing for us to take a seat. "We'll be here to protect you and keep you updated." I sank into a chair, exhaustion washing over me. Emma sat beside me, her expression a mix of relief and fear. "Thank you for helping us," I said, my voice quiet. "Of course. You both did the right thing by calling for help," the officer replied. "We're going to take this very seriously. You'll have a security detail with you at all times until we can ensure your safety." I glanced at Emma, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's so overwhelming," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I know," I replied, my heart aching for both of us. "But we'll figure this out together." As the officers began to explain the protocols for our safety, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Yes, the darkness was still out there, but for now, we were safe. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to hope that we could reclaim our lives from this nightmare. As the officers finished their briefing, the weight of reality settled heavily on my shoulders. The safe house was sterile, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights, and devoid of any personal touches. It felt more like a holding area than a sanctuary. I glanced around, taking in the stark white walls and plain furniture, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of claustrophobia creeping in. "We'll assign you a liaison officer who will be your point of contact," one of the officers explained, his voice firm but reassuring. "They'll keep you updated on the investigation and ensure your safety." I nodded, though a sense of dread lingered. The idea of someone watching over us felt both comforting and invasive. Would I ever feel truly safe again? Emma leaned closer to me, her fingers intertwining with mine. "What if they can't catch him?" she whispered, her voice laced with fear. "We have to trust them," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "They've trained for this. They know what they're doing." As the officers continued their discussion, I tried to focus on the mundane details, the layout of the safe house, the way the officers moved with purpose, but my mind was racing. The shadow of the man outside our apartment loomed large in my thoughts. What did he want from me? Why had he chosen me? My thoughts were interrupted when a young officer, probably in his late 20s, approached us with a reassuring smile. "Hi, I'm Officer Davis. I'll be your liaison," he said, his tone friendly. "Thank you for being here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know this is a lot to take in, but you're in good hands," he replied. "We have extra security measures in place. No one will be able to get to you without us knowing. Can you tell us what's being done to find him?" Emma asked, her tone more demanding than I expected. "Of course," Officer Davis replied. "We've deployed units to canvass the area around your apartment. We're also coordinating with local surveillance cameras to track his movements. Your safety is our top priority. Is there a chance he could come here?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Officer Davis met my gaze, his expression serious. "It's unlikely. We've increased patrols in the area, and the building is secure. But I understand your concerns, and we will do everything to keep you safe." I nodded, but the gnawing fear in my stomach refused to dissipate. "Can we have our phones?" Emma asked, glancing at me. "I want to let my family know we're okay." Officer Davis hesitated for a moment. We'll need to check the devices for any potential threats or messages first. It's standard procedure. Emma nodded, but her disappointment was evident. I felt the same way. The thought of being cut off from the world was suffocating. I wanted to reach out to my followers to assure them that I was safe, but I also understood the need for caution. Once Officer Davis had taken our phones for inspection, he gestured for us to follow him to a small, sparsely furnished room off to the side. It had a table, 2 chairs, and a whiteboard filled with notes and diagrams. "This will be your temporary space," he explained. "You can stay here for now while we sort out the logistics." As we entered the room, I noticed a small window, the glass tinted for privacy. It felt strangely comforting, like a small glimpse into the outside world. I approached it, gazing out at the darkened street below, where the flickering lights of patrol cars illuminated the night. "Can you see anything?" Emma asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Not really," I replied, shaking my head. "Just police cars." "It looks normal." "Normal," she echoed, her voice tinged with disbelief. "This isn't normal at all." I turned back to her, trying to gauge her emotions. Emma's face was pale, her lips pressed tightly together as if she were trying to contain her fear. "Hey," I said softly, stepping closer. "We're going to get through this. We just have to stay strong." She nodded but didn't speak, her gaze fixed on the floor as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. I could see the fear etched on her face, the shadows of what we had experienced lingering in her eyes. "I wish we could just go home," Emma finally said, her voice breaking. "I know." "I feel the same way," I admitted, my heart aching for both of us. "But right now, home doesn't feel safe. We need to let the police handle this." Emma wrapped her arms around herself, hugging tightly as if trying to shield herself from the reality that surrounded us. I could see her vulnerability, the cracks in her brave facade. "Do you think we'll ever feel safe again?" she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to assure her that everything would return to normal, but the truth was that I wasn't sure. "I hope so," I said, my voice steady. "But it might take time." Just then, Officer Davis returned, his expression serious. "We've checked your phones, and everything appears safe for now," he said, handing them back to us. "But I recommend keeping your social media accounts private for a while until we can assess the situation further." "Thank you," I said, taking my phone and quickly checking for any missed messages. There were a few from concerned friends, and I felt a pang of guilt for worrying them, but I didn't have the energy to respond right now. "We'll have a team monitoring your accounts," Officer Davis added. "And if you receive any further threats, report them immediately." I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle back on my shoulders. It was exhausting, trying to keep my emotions in check while also navigating the chaos of the past few days. "Can we have some privacy?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "Of course," Officer Davis replied, stepping back toward the door. "Just press the buzzer if you need anything. We'll be close by." As the door clicked shut behind him, I sank into a chair, the exhaustion crashing over me in waves. I closed my eyes, willing my mind to quiet, but the events of the night replayed in a haunting loop. "Do you want to talk about it?" Emma asked, her voice soft and tentative. I opened my eyes, meeting her gaze. "I don't know if I can," I admitted. "It all feels too overwhelming." Emma nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I get it. But we need to stick together. We can't let this tear us apart. I felt a surge of gratitude for her presence, for the way she grounded me when everything felt chaotic. You're right. I wish things were different. Me too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In that moment of shared vulnerability, I realized that we were not just survivors of a frightening experience, we were also allies in a battle against fear and uncertainty. As the hours passed in the sterile, safe house, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a heavy sense of fatigue. Emma and I talked quietly, sharing stories about our lives before this nightmare, reminiscing about simpler times to distract ourselves from the present. But as the night wore on, the darkness outside seemed to creep closer, and the fear that had been momentarily pushed aside began to resurface. Do you think he's still out there? I asked, my voice trembling. I don't know, Emma admitted, her expression turning serious. But we need to stay vigilant. The thought sent a chill down my spine. What if he finds us here? Emma shook her head, trying to remain hopeful. The police are watching over us. They won't let anything happen. Just then, the sound of a loud bang echoed through the building, causing us both to jump. My heart raced as I looked at Emma, her face pale with fear. What was that? She whispered, her eyes wide. I don't know, I replied, my pulse quickening. The noise sounded again, louder this time, followed by hurried footsteps in the hallway. Stay quiet, I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. The footsteps grew closer, and I felt a surge of panic. What if it was him? What if he had found us? I held Emma's hand tightly, our fear palpable in the small room. Then, the door burst open, and a group of officers rushed in, their faces serious. We need you to come with us, one of them said urgently. Why? What's happening? I asked, my heart racing. There's been a security breach. We need to move you to a more secure location, the officer replied, his voice steady but urgent. My breath caught in my throat as fear washed over me. Is it him? We don't know, but we need to act quickly, the officer insisted. I looked at Emma, who nodded, her eyes wide with fear. Okay. Let's go. As we stood up, I felt the weight of uncertainty settle back over us like a dark shroud. The officers led us through the dimly lit hallways, the urgency of the situation driving us forward. With every step, my mind raced with questions. What was happening? Was he really out there? And most importantly, would we ever be free of this fear? As we followed the officers through the dim hallways, the air felt thick with tension, each step echoing ominously in my ears. My heart raced, and I could feel Emma's anxiety mirrored in my own. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting erratic shadows on the walls, amplifying the uncertainty of our situation. Where are we going? I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady despite the rising panic within me. To a more secure location within the building, one of the officers replied curtly. We've had an alert, and we need to ensure your safety. I exchanged a worried glance with Emma. What did an alert mean? Was there really a threat? My mind was racing through scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. The thought of the man outside our apartment, his shadowy figure lingering in my memory, made my skin crawl. We arrived at a reinforced door, a stark contrast to the other plain doors in the building. The officer turned to us, his expression serious. This room has extra security measures. You'll be safe here. As the door swung open, I was met with a small, windowless room. It was equipped with a couple of chairs, a table, and a large monitor displaying feeds from various security cameras. The walls were lined with soundproofing panels, and there was a palpable sense of isolation. "Is this really necessary?" Emma whispered as we stepped inside, her eyes darting around the room. "Trust us," the officer said. "We're doing everything we can to protect you. You'll have access to communication with your liaison, and we'll keep you updated." The door clicked shut behind us, and I felt a wave of claustrophobia wash over me. I looked at Emma, who was pacing, her anxiety bubbling over. What if they can't find him? What if he's still out there? "He's not going to find us," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. "The police are doing their job. We just need to stay calm and let them handle it." Emma nodded, but the unease in her eyes told me she wasn't convinced. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I needed to be strong for both of us. "Let's check the news," I suggested, moving towards the monitor. "Maybe there's an update." I tapped a few buttons, and the screen flickered to life, displaying the local news. The headline read, "Social media influencer targeted in string of threats." I felt a chill run down my spine as the anchor continued, describing the recent events surrounding my life, my rise to popularity, the threats I have received, and the police investigation now underway. "Officials urge the public to remain vigilant," the anchor said, her voice serious. "If anyone has information regarding the case, they should contact the police immediately." I glanced at Emma, whose face had turned pale. "This is unreal," she murmured, her voice trembling. "It feels like a nightmare." "I know," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "But we'll wake up from it eventually." Just as I was about to turn off the monitor, a breaking news alert flashed across the screen. "Police have apprehended a suspect in connection with the threats against local influencer, details to follow." My heart raced at the word suspect. Had they really caught him? Would I finally feel safe again? The officer from earlier re-entered the room, interrupting my thoughts. "We have news," he said, his expression a mix of urgency and relief. "The police have apprehended a suspect, but we're still working to confirm his identity. We need to keep you in protective custody for now." "Is it him?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We can't confirm anything until we have all the details," he said. "But rest assured, you're safe here. We'll let you know when we have more information." As he spoke, I felt a mix of hope and trepidation. What if they hadn't caught the right person? What if this was just the beginning? "We'll be monitoring your accounts," the officer continued. "So please refrain from using them until we can verify everything. The last thing we want is for you to unintentionally draw attention to yourself." Emma shot me a look, her expression a blend of frustration and fear. "But I need to tell my followers I'm okay. They'll worry if they don't hear from me." "I understand," the officer replied, "but right now, your safety is the priority. We'll get through this together." Once he left, I sank into one of the chairs, my heart still racing. Emma paced the small room, her hands running through her hair in agitation. "We're just sitting ducks in here," she said, her voice rising. "What if they don't find him? What if he's still out there?" "We have to stay positive," I replied, but my voice felt hollow. "The police are trained for this. They'll find him." "Will they?" Emma shot back, her frustration spilling over. "What if this is all just a ploy? What if he's playing with us?" "Emma, stop!" I snapped, unable to contain my own fear. "I know it's hard, but we need to hold it together. We can't let our fear consume us. Silence filled the room, and I could feel the tension between us thickening. We were both on edge, our emotions raw and fragile. Finally, Emma sighed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I'm sorry. I don't know what to think anymore. It's okay, I said, my voice softer now. We're both scared. This isn't normal, and it's okay to feel that way. She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I just wish I could go back to a time when everything felt safe and normal. Me too, I replied, feeling the same ache in my heart. But I also knew we had to focus on the present. Let's just take it one step at a time. We'll get through this. As the hours dragged on, we fell into a tentative rhythm, talking about everything and nothing, trying to distract ourselves from the reality outside those walls. But even in our attempts to find solace in each other's company, the dark undercurrents of fear and uncertainty loomed over us like a storm cloud. Suddenly, the door swung open again, and Officer Davis stepped inside, his expression serious. We have some news, he said, his voice steady. My heart raced as I braced myself for what he was about to say. We've confirmed the identity of the suspect, he continued, his tone grave. And we need to talk to you both about what comes next. What does that mean? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. It means that we need to prepare you for the possibility that the threat isn't over, he replied, his gaze unwavering. We'll be implementing additional safety measures, and we need your full cooperation. I looked at Emma, who was visibly shaking. What kind of measures? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. First, we'll be relocating you to a different location. This is no longer secure, Officer Davis explained. Second, you'll need to stay off all social media until we can ensure your safety. Relocate? Emma echoed, her face pale. But what if we lose everything? Our lives, our friends? It's a temporary measure for your safety, he insisted. We'll do our best to keep you updated and comfortable, but we need to act quickly. I felt my heart sink as the weight of his words settled in. This was our reality now, a life on the run, haunted by an unknown threat. Okay, I said, forcing the words out through a tight throat. We'll do whatever it takes to be safe. Good, Officer Davis replied, a hint of relief in his eyes. We'll get you packed up and out of here in 15 minutes. As he left the room, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. The thought of leaving everything behind felt like a betrayal to the life I had built, but I knew it was necessary. Our safety had to come first. Are you ready for this? I asked Emma, who was staring blankly at the wall. I don't think I have a choice, she replied, her voice shaking. With a heavy heart, I grabbed my phone, typing out a quick message to my closest friends, just a simple "I'm okay, but I need to go offline for a while." I pressed send, feeling a pang of loss as I watched the message disappear into the void of uncertainty. Let's just get through this, I said, trying to sound hopeful. We'll figure it out together. Emma nodded, and I could see the determination slowly returning to her eyes. As we prepared to leave the safe house, I realized that no matter what happened next, we would face it side by side, ready to confront whatever darkness awaited us. As the clock ticked down to our departure, I felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. Fear, uncertainty, and a flicker of hope danced like shadows in the corners of my mind. We had little time to pack, so I threw some clothes into a bag, my movements frantic yet methodical. I glanced at Emma, who was sitting on the edge of the chair, her fingers anxiously tapping on her phone. Are you sure you don't want to take more? I asked, noticing her reluctance to pack. "I just want to get out of here," she replied, her voice low. "None of this feels real. I don't even know where we're going." Her words struck a chord deep within me. I didn't know where we were heading either. The officers hadn't shared any details, only assuring us that it was for our safety. That uncertainty loomed over us like a thick fog, obscuring our path forward. "Do you think we'll ever feel normal again?" she asked suddenly, her gaze piercing mine. "I hope so," I replied, trying to inject some optimism into my tone. "But right now, we need to focus on staying safe. That's the most important thing." The door opened again, and Officer Davis returned, flanked by 2 other officers. "It's time to go," he said firmly, gesturing for us to follow. As we stepped into the hallway, the world outside felt like a distant memory, as if we were leaving behind the remnants of our previous lives. The officers led us through a series of corridors, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were moving through a maze, one designed to keep us safe, but also to keep us confined. "Stay close," Davis instructed, his tone stern yet reassuring. "We'll be moving quickly." I nodded, but my mind was racing. What awaited us outside? Were we truly safe? The questions piled up, each one more daunting than the last. I could sense Emma's apprehension beside me, our silent connection growing stronger as we navigated this unfamiliar territory together. We reached a stairwell, and the officers ushered us down the dimly lit steps. I could hear the faint sound of voices echoing from below, but they quickly faded as we descended. Each step felt heavy, as if the weight of our fears was pressing down on my chest, making it harder to breathe. Finally, we emerged into a small parking garage, the fluorescent lights buzzing above us. The scent of concrete and oil filled the air, grounding me momentarily in reality. In the far corner, a black SUV awaited us, its windows tinted and imposing. "Get in," Davis instructed, opening the back door for us. I climbed into the car, my heart racing as I looked around. The interior was dark and spacious, with minimal decoration. Emma slipped in beside me, her eyes wide as she took in our surroundings. "What if he finds us?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "He won't," I replied, forcing confidence into my words. "They're taking precautions. Just trust them." The officers piled into the front seats, and the engine roared to life. As we pulled out of the garage, I couldn't help but glance back at the building we were leaving behind. A mixture of relief and sadness washed over me. That place had been my sanctuary, now tainted by fear. As we navigated through the streets, I felt a sense of disorientation. The city I had known so well now seemed foreign and threatening. I stared out the window, watching familiar landmarks flash by, each one tinged with memories of my life before the chaos. "How far are we going?" I asked, breaking the heavy silence in the car. "Just a short drive," Davis answered, his eyes focused on the road. "We're taking you to a temporary safe house until we can ensure your security." "Is it safe there?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have it secured with additional surveillance and personnel," Davis reassured us. "You'll have everything you need, but we'll need to limit your communication for a bit longer." I felt a pang of frustration but understood the necessity. My life had become a series of restrictions, each one a reminder of how far I had fallen from my previous existence. The car turned down a quiet street, and I could see trees lining the road, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. As we pulled up to a modest house, my heart raced again. "This is it," Davis announced, exiting the vehicle. I followed suit, stepping out into the cool air. The house was unassuming, blending seamlessly into the neighborhood. It was painted a soft beige, with a welcoming porch that gave it a homey feel, nothing like the chaos I had come to associate with my life. We were ushered inside, and as I crossed the threshold, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The interior was cozy, filled with warm lighting and simple furnishings. A small living room greeted us, and I could see a kitchen off to the side. It felt almost like a normal home. "Make yourselves comfortable," Davis said, his tone shifting slightly. "We'll be here for a while. If you need anything, just let us know." "Thanks," I replied, my voice shaky. As the officers moved to set up equipment, I turned to Emma. "What do you think?" "It's nicer than I expected," she admitted, glancing around. "But it doesn't feel safe." "Not really." "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But at least we're away from the apartment. That's something, right?" She nodded, though her expression remained uncertain. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. "We need to try to relax," I suggested, moving toward the couch. "Maybe watch some TV or something?" Emma settled next to me, and we flicked through channels until we found a light-hearted comedy. The laughter coming from the screen was a welcome distraction, even if it felt surreal in our current situation. But as the minutes ticked by, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The laughter was hollow, a reminder of how fragile our happiness had become. I glanced at Emma, who was biting her lip, lost in thought. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. "I'm just thinking about everything," she admitted. "What if this is just the beginning? What if there are more threats out there?" "We can't think like that," I said firmly. "We need to focus on the present. The police are doing their job. They'll keep us safe." "But what if they don't?" she pressed, her eyes wide with fear. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I wish I had all the answers. I just don't know." The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. I shot a glance at Davis, who immediately stood up, his demeanor shifting into one of alertness. "Stay here," he ordered, moving toward the door with a determined stride. Emma and I exchanged worried glances as the seconds ticked by. What if it was him? What if our safety was an illusion? The questions gnawed at me as I sat there, my heart racing. Davis opened the door, and I strained to hear the conversation. After a few tense moments, he returned, a new officer following behind him. "This is Officer Kim," Davis introduced. "She'll be assisting us with your case." "Nice to meet you," Officer Kim said, her tone professional but warm. "Thanks," I replied, trying to gauge her demeanor. "What's the update?" "We're still following leads on the threats," Kim explained, her expression serious. "But for now, we need to discuss your security protocols." As she laid out the details, I felt a mix of gratitude and frustration. They were doing their best to protect us, but the sense of helplessness lingered. I wanted to be proactive, to fight back against the unknown. "We'll need to establish a routine," she continued. "You have a dedicated team watching over you, but we need your cooperation as well." "What does that involve?" I asked, leaning forward. "Limiting your exposure to the outside world is essential," she said. "This means no social media, no sharing your location, and minimal communication with anyone outside this house until we can confirm it's safe." Emma's face fell, and I could feel her frustration mounting. "But I can't just disappear. My followers need to know I'm okay." We understand your concerns, but right now, your safety comes first, Davis interjected, his tone firm but compassionate. The weight of their words settled heavily on my shoulders. We'll do what we have to do, I said, my voice resolute. After discussing the security measures, Officer Kim offered us a comforting smile. I know this is a lot to process, but we're here for you. You're not alone in this. As the officers prepared to leave, I felt a sense of camaraderie form between us. They were doing their best to protect us, and I needed to remember that. Once they left, the house fell silent again, the atmosphere thick with the unsaid. Emma and I sat on the couch, our thoughts swirling in a tumultuous dance of fear and uncertainty. Do you think we'll ever feel normal again? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hope so, I replied, my heart aching for the life we had once known. But deep down, I knew that normal was a thing of the past. Our lives had irrevocably changed, and we would have to navigate this new reality together, one step at a time. As the officers exited, I turned to Emma, who sat beside me, her fingers now tangled in her hair, a sign of her mounting anxiety. The silence in the room felt palpable, like a weight pressing down on us. I shifted on the couch, trying to shake off the chill creeping into my bones. I can't stop thinking about those messages, Emma finally admitted, her voice trembling slightly. What if they're really out there? What if they know where we are? I took a deep breath, attempting to steady my racing heart. We have to trust the police. They're trained for this kind of situation. Yet even as I spoke, doubt gnawed at me. How could I be sure we were safe? We should at least check our phones, Emma suggested. Maybe we can find something, some clue. I hesitated. But the officers said to limit our communication. I know, but I need to know if I have more messages. What if it's important? Her eyes were wide, a mixture of fear and determination. All right, I relented, feeling the weight of her worry pressing down on me. Just a quick look, okay? We pulled out our phones, the familiar devices feeling like anchors to the lives we used to lead. I opened my social media app, my heart sinking as I saw a flood of notifications. Messages from worried friends, comments from followers asking if I was okay, and, at the very top, a direct message from an account I didn't recognize. You can't hide from me. I will find you. My stomach twisted as I read the message aloud, feeling as though ice water had been poured into my veins. Who is that? Emma whispered, her face paling. I don't know, I replied, my hand shaking slightly as I scrolled through the profile. It was new, with no posts and a blank avatar. My skin prickled with fear. It feels like the person is watching us. Like they know where we are. Emma's eyes darted to the window, and I could see her mind racing with possibilities. What if they're already here? What if they've been watching us since we got here? Emma, stop, I said sharply, trying to regain control of the conversation. We don't know that. Let's not jump to conclusions. But inside, I shared her fear. The world outside felt darker, more sinister, every shadow in the corners of the room now threatening. I quickly shut off my phone, the device suddenly feeling like a dangerous connection to the chaos that had enveloped our lives. Let's distract ourselves, I suggested, desperate for any reprieve from the tension. How about we find something to eat? Emma nodded, but her eyes remained distant. I guess. I'm just not that hungry. We made our way to the kitchen, the comforting scent of coffee wafting through the air. I poured us both a cup, hoping the warmth would calm our frayed nerves. Do you want something to eat? I think I saw some snacks in the cupboard, I offered, trying to keep the atmosphere light. Sure, I guess. Just something small, Emma replied, her voice still distant. As I rummaged through the cupboards, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Each sound in the house felt amplified, the creaking of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock on the wall, each noise adding to the weight of the silence. We sat at the small kitchen table, the fluorescent light casting a stark glow over us as we munched on some crackers. I tried to engage Emma in conversation, but she seemed lost in her thoughts, her gaze drifting to the window. Do you think it's safe to look outside? She asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt a surge of protectiveness for her. Let's just stay away from the windows for now. We don't know what's out there. Right, she nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to feel safe, to regain some semblance of normalcy, but we were trapped in this cycle of fear. As we finished our snack, I glanced at the clock. Hours had passed, the sun dipping lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the windows. The house felt smaller, closing in around us. I wish we could just go home, I said, my voice thick with longing. Me too, Emma replied, her tone softening. But we can't go back until it's safe. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. We'll get through this together. We just have to stick to the plan. Her eyes glimmered with unshed tears. I'm scared, you know? I don't want to be here. I don't want to feel like this. I know, I whispered, squeezing her hand. But we're not alone. We have each other. As if on cue, the doorbell rang again, jolting us both. My heart raced, and I exchanged a quick glance with Emma. Stay here, I said, pulling her closer to the wall as I moved toward the front door. My heart thudded in my chest, a primal instinct urging me to protect her. Davis was back, this time with a concerned look etched on his face. I need to talk to you both. It's important. I nodded, feeling the weight of dread settle over me again. What's going on? Have you received any more messages? He asked, his tone grave. I hesitated, glancing at Emma. I got one just before you arrived. Show me, he instructed, his eyes sharp. I fished out my phone, my hands trembling as I handed it over. Davis read the message, his expression growing darker. This isn't good, he murmured, running a hand through his hair. We need to tighten security. I'm going to call in more personnel. Is it really that serious? I asked, my heart sinking further. We don't take these threats lightly, he replied. We need to ensure you're protected at all costs. This person is determined. Emma's breath hitched beside me, and I could see the fear creeping back into her eyes. What does that mean for us? Are we in danger? Davis's gaze softened slightly. We'll do everything we can to keep you safe. Just stick to the plan. No more outside communication for now. We'll need to monitor your devices. I don't want to feel like a prisoner, I said, my frustration bubbling to the surface. I understand, he replied, his tone calming. But this is for your protection. We're working on getting to the bottom of this, I promise. With that, he stepped out, leaving us alone again. The atmosphere felt thicker now, the walls closing in. I hate this, Emma said, her voice breaking. I do too, I admitted, feeling a rush of helplessness wash over me. We returned to the couch, the weight of our circumstances pressing down on us like an anchor. As we sat together, I could feel the shift in the air. Fear had taken root, and there was no escaping its grasp. "Let's watch something," I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. Emma nodded, and we turned on the television, the screen flickering to life. But even the distractions couldn't shake the feeling of dread hanging in the air. Each passing moment felt like a countdown, and I knew deep down that the worst was yet to come. The hours ticked by, our laughter fading as the glow of the television bathed us in a dim light. The news anchor's voices droned on, their faces a blur as we sat cocooned in our own world of fear. Emma had settled into the crook of my arm, but I could sense her unease. The world outside was growing darker, and with it, the shadows in our hearts deepened. As the night crept in, I pulled the curtains tightly shut, blocking out the world that felt increasingly hostile. The ambient sounds of the neighborhood faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to echo our thoughts. My phone vibrated again on the coffee table, a sharp reminder of the lingering danger. "Not again," I muttered under my breath, picking it up. The notification glared back at me, the screen illuminating my face like a spotlight. "I'm coming for you. You can't hide." My pulse quickened, dread pooling in my stomach. I exchanged a glance with Emma, who had turned pale as she read the message over my shoulder. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Call Davis," I said, urgency rising within me. "We need to inform him about this." Before I could dial, the lights flickered ominously, plunging us into darkness for a split second before the power stabilized. A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, adding an electric tension to the air. Emma's grip tightened on my arm. "It's just a storm," I assured her, though I could hear the uncertainty in my own voice. "It'll be fine." But deep down, a primal fear clawed at me. This was no ordinary storm, and I feared it was just the beginning of our turmoil. Just as I found Davis's number in my contacts, a loud crash echoed from outside, making us both jump. My heart raced as I hesitated, unsure of what could be happening beyond the safety of our walls. "Stay here," I instructed Emma firmly, and she nodded, eyes wide with anxiety. I moved cautiously to the window, peering through the curtain. The rain lashed against the glass, and the street lamp flickered intermittently, casting erratic shadows across the yard. In the dim light, I caught sight of a figure standing across the street. The person was hooded, their outline obscured by the rain and darkness. My breath caught in my throat, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. "Who is it?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she joined me. "I don't know," I replied, my heart pounding in my ears. "But I think they're watching us." We backed away from the window, a heavy sense of dread settling over us. "What if it's them?" Emma breathed, her eyes darting toward the door as if it might shield us from the unseen threat. I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the rising panic. "We need to stay calm," I said, but my own words felt hollow. "Let's call Davis." As I dialed, the phone rang incessantly, but there was no answer. Each ring felt like a countdown, a reminder of how isolated we were. I tried again, but still nothing. "Davis," I shouted, frustration bubbling over. "Pick up." Suddenly, the power flickered again, and the house fell dark. The emergency lights in the hallway cast eerie shadows, heightening the sense of foreboding. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, the beam piercing through the gloom. "What do we do?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. "Let's head to the back door," I said, my mind racing. "We can escape through the yard and get to the neighbor's house." Before we could move, a loud bang echoed through the house, and I froze, my heart racing. The noise reverberated from the front door, and my instincts screamed at me to hide. "Go," I urged, ushering Emma toward the back. As we crept through the hallway, I could feel the air thickening around us, each step echoing ominously in the silence. Just as we reached the back door, another crash rattled through the house, this one more violent than before. I looked back, heart hammering in my chest. "We have to hurry." I threw the door open and we dashed into the yard, rain soaking us instantly. The cold droplets felt like icy needles against my skin, but I couldn't focus on anything but the need to get away. As we reached the edge of the property, I glanced back at the house. The figure was now in the doorway, the hood obscuring their face but revealing a menacing silhouette against the dim light. "Run!" I shouted, pulling Emma along as we sprinted toward the neighbor's house, the pounding of our hearts synchronizing with the rhythm of the storm. We reached the neighbor's front porch, breathless and terrified. I knocked frantically, the sound swallowed by the storm. "Please, let us in." The door swung open, revealing Mr. Henderson, an older gentleman who looked as if he had just been roused from sleep. "What on earth?" "We need help. Someone is after us," I blurted out, my voice cracking with urgency. He stepped aside, allowing us to rush in. "What do you mean?" he asked, confusion flashing across his face as he closed the door behind us. "Just lock the door," Emma urged, panic etched in her features. He quickly secured the locks, his brows furrowing in concern. "You kids need to calm down. What happened?" I took a deep breath, struggling to steady my racing heart. "There's someone out there. They've been sending threats. We think they're trying to get to us." "Threats?" he echoed, the gravity of the situation dawning on him. "Have you called the police?" "I tried," I said, feeling the despair seep in. "But they're not answering." Mr. Henderson's eyes narrowed, and he glanced toward the window, his expression shifting to one of alarm. "We need to call them again. Right now." As he fumbled for his phone, I felt the tension in the air change. It was no longer just fear, it was the weight of impending doom. Emma and I exchanged a glance, both knowing that we were still not safe. Just then, the lights flickered again, and the atmosphere grew heavier, laden with unspoken dread. The storm outside roared, and in the distance, thunder rolled like a warning. "Did you see anyone outside?" Mr. Henderson asked, his voice a mix of authority and concern. "Only a figure," I replied, recalling the shape that had haunted me since we left the house. "They were just standing there." As we waited for Mr. Henderson to make the call, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched, that the danger was not over yet. A sense of foreboding hung in the air, thick as the storm that raged outside. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the house, sending all of us jumping. "What was that?" Emma gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "Stay here," I commanded, adrenaline coursing through me. I grabbed a nearby lamp, its heavy base giving me a sense of security. "I'll check it out." "No. It's too dangerous," Emma pleaded, grabbing my arm. "I have to," I insisted, my voice firm. "We can't wait for whatever is happening to come to us." Mr. Henderson nodded, his expression grave. "I'll stay here with her. Just be careful." With a deep breath, I moved toward the back door, my heart pounding in my chest. The darkness seemed to stretch infinitely before me, and I felt the weight of the unknown pressing against me. Stepping outside, the rain lashed against my face, blurring my vision. I strained to listen, heart racing, each sound amplified in the storm. As I approached the corner of the house, I saw movement, a dark figure slipping through the shadows, edging closer to the back door. My breath caught in my throat. "Hey!" I shouted, brandishing the lamp like a weapon. "Who's there?" The figure froze, then turned slowly, and I felt my blood run cold. The hood fell back, revealing a familiar face twisted with rage. It was someone I knew, someone from my past who had always lurked in the background, always wanting more. Surprised to see me, the figure sneered, stepping closer. "No," I managed to reply, disbelief mingling with horror. "What are you doing here?" "I've come to finish what I started," they replied, a manic glint in their eyes. With a surge of adrenaline, I swung the lamp, but they were faster, dodging to the side. The storm roared around us, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. "Stay back," I shouted, the fear boiling over into anger. "You won't hurt anyone." "You think you can stop me?" They laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You've brought this upon yourself." Before I could react, they lunged, and I swung the lamp again, catching them off guard. The impact sent them staggering back, but they quickly regained their footing, eyes burning with fury. "Why are you doing this?" I yelled, desperation creeping into my voice. "What do you want?" "You think you can have it all?" They spat, anger crackling in the air. "Fame, attention, you don't deserve it. I'll show you what it means to be afraid." With a surge of determination, I steadied myself, ready to fight. "You're wrong. I'm not afraid of you. Not anymore." In that moment, everything around us seemed to blur. The storm raged on, but all that mattered was the confrontation before me. I had to protect Emma and ensure she was safe, no matter the cost. As they lunged forward again, I braced myself, the lamp raised high. "This ends now." The thunder crashed overhead as I swung the lamp with all my might, and for a moment, time froze. I could see the realization in their eyes as the light hit them, illuminating the madness within. Then, the world exploded into chaos, metal clashed against flesh, the storm howled, and in that moment, I knew the fight was far from over. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.